crazy. My bad. You guys missed out on the Punjabi song I was listening to. How are we doing? Voice is back. Good. Good to know. Gang. Some motivation in the beginning of today's class before we will actually start. पहले ही बता देता हूँ, I will be upfront. Very beginner friendly class, sort of a revision class. Might feel like, अरे, we are doing the same thing again. But feel free to drop off after the first 5-10 minutes. There is some motivation in the first 5 to 10 minutes. The chat is going haywire, so let me just pause it for a second. Go full speed today. Actually, we'll go slow today. Tomorrow we might, but today we will go slow. Someone made 5+ contributions to Submitly. Beautiful. Submitly. That is the GSOC organization, I think. Good. We'll wait for 2 more minutes before we actually start today's class. Tab tak listen to some nice Punjabi music. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but it's a good song. Opening chat again. Feels like the chat is more manageable today. Slightly lesser people. All right. Cannot hear song or cannot hear me? Yeah, I'll go slow. Don't worry. We'll go slow. We'll go slow. Don't worry. All right. The mic is really good. Cancels out everything. All right. Let me set things up on my side a little bit. Little motivation in the beginning. Motivation is basically related to the market finally recovering. And the importance of having some conviction, especially if you're a beginner right now, beginning to learn. Okay. Let me start local recording here as well. Give me 1 second. Audio would be my mic. Hello, mic testing. Alrighty. Let me share my screen here. All right, guys. 7:02. So let's start. I'm going to start with some importance of having conviction in life on things that you know are going to do well, but sometimes you're like, I don't know. I don't think if this field is for me. So I've been working, I worked at a company, basically been working in this company for a while. And for the longest time, Web3 is in the biggest bear. Everyone can see Web3 markets are crashing. Everything is so bad. In fact, the day I joined this company, 5 days after that, FTX collapsed. And Solana went down to really low. Even though it was clear that Solana is a good sort of blockchain, it went down to $9. It stayed there for a year. It was barely touched $20. And then in the last 1 month, what has happened? This has happened. From here, $9. So this is the last 1 year. This is when I joined Web3. $9. Biggest crash, whatever. Time to lose conviction at this point. But what did I do? I kept conviction. I stayed here. Grinded. Take 1 year, not really seeing enough growth when it comes to personal investments in Solana, or generally, if this goes up, a Solana company will also, do well, funds will get raised, so on and so forth. Suddenly, what happened? Something big happened. If you look at the year macro, this thing, it's almost 7x. What does that tell you? Have conviction. This is called slowly, and all at once. So if you're in that stage, I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know if I'm not understanding basic things. Have some conviction over the next 1 year, or however long your programming journey might be. Generally, I feel the bull is almost here. At least in Web3 follows other markets. Even look at public markets, everything is recovering well. So there might be a good chance, job opportunities, bigger job opportunities open up. When they do, please be prepared and be there at the forefront of it. For that, have conviction. It might take a lot of time, but slowly, and then all at once. Okay? When this happens, is like what is happening. I was about to show something else also, my crypto portfolio, and my biggest bet there, which was again this company only that I worked for, and how holding through the bears helped me so much. I'm not going to show now. I think of it's not the best idea, but high level, what is the learning here? Have conviction. This sideline might happen for the longest time, but eventually when things recover, they recover very quickly. I see signs for it recovering. Cool. That is the high level motivation initially. Now let's get into the slides and understand what exactly are we discussing today. So let me open Come on, come on. There we go. Close this. All right. Do a quick mic check here. Can you guys hear me well? Is my mic okay? Can you guys see the screen? All right. Good to go, G. Week 2.1. Today we're discussing 5 things. If you know all of these 5 things, skip the class, spend your time doing something better. This is sort of a revision class where we're learning callbacks, asynchronous functions, promises, some extra JavaScript functions like maps and filters and assignments. Assignments from last week, some assignments for the upcoming week I want to solve today. So you can, understand people who are stuck, how to approach an assignment. Okay? If you already know this, feel free to skip the video. More of a revision class, no bounties today. Okay? That is a high level. Let's get right into it. Week 2.1. Before we start, where are we at? This is the syllabus we have to cover. This is where we are at right now. As you can see, might feel intimidating. Harkirat, 1 week has gone. We are still here. What about everything else? Good question, sir. For people who are struggling here itself, try to go through offline videos. I have covered 3 offline videos in the last week, just to cover the most basic concepts also, and the most difficult thing, which is asynchronous programming and promises also. 1.5 is probably the best video I have personally ever created. The time it took to create those slides was much higher than most classes. The reason was to break down a complex topic to like a very real world example. Try to go through at least 1.5. That should cover the most difficult concept for this week or in this section, which is promises. This, especially promises, gets better with practice. If you will keep doing the same problems again and keep getting stuck there again, it will feel like I don't want to do it. But at the same time, as we get into more things, you will use promises again. When you use promises again in different scenarios is when slowly you can build intuition in case you are not able to understand it yet. As the weeks progress, if you are consistent with the syntax will fall into place, but you have to be consistent. This is the point to drop off. Don't drop off. Please be consistent. At least try to keep going through videos, go through other videos on YouTube on the same topic and do assignments. That's the only thing I ask for until this hump sort of gets crossed of asynchronous programming. Consistency is everything. Don't drop off. You need one eureka moment at which you'll be like, oh, this is asynchronous programming. And then, programming becomes interesting after that. So there are 3 big humps in full stack. Generally, I have covered this in a video I did a few months ago, where I told the humps in Web3, in AI, and full stack development. In full stack, there are 3 humps. Asynchronous nature of JS, the hump we are currently at. It is a smooth ride for weeks after this until we reach React. React is the second hump where things don't fall into place. There also we will have to spend extra classes, extra timed out sessions, offline sessions. And then the third hump is JavaScript to TypeScript. We are at the first one yet. It gets much easier after this. Things are, if you were able to get over this hump, by which I mean you're actually able to understand promises, then things from here will be much simpler. Feel free to go through this video. And this is like some timestamp here where you can see the 3 humps. Cool. All right. The gist of the first hump is, if you understand this, you are sorted. If not, there is a knowledge gap. The gist of it is promises. Generally, the gist is these 3 syntaxes. If you understand this, you can say you are good. If you don't understand either one of these, then there is a problem. This code might look a little ugly because I took a screenshot, but this is the end of video 1.5 on the platform. So go to the platform after this video if you haven't already seen it. See this video. At the end, there are 3 sections. If you understand all 3 of these code bases, you're sorted to proceed. If not, there is a knowledge gap. You either have to, then maybe I'm not the best instructor to teach you this. Go to other resources. Try to figure out at least promises and async await. We've spent like enough hours on getting to understand this syntax. If you still don't get it, practice or find resources and somehow at least get over the first hump of promises and async await. Cool. That's the high level initial things I wanted to cover before we actually start to code. Okay? Cool. Prerequisites for this class is functions, wheres, const, data types in JavaScript. What are data types? Things like strings, numbers, booleans, objects, and arrays. These are prerequisites. We have covered these last week. I've also covered this in detail in an offline video. If you don't understand this, then whatever is coming after this, you might not be able to. So go to last week's videos and go this, and then come back to this video. If you understand this, then cool, you're good to go for today's video. Alrighty. Cool. Let's take a breather here. We're now about to get into today's session and sort of revise a few things we have actually already covered in the last 5 lectures. That is 1 live lecture and 3 offline lectures, so last 4 lectures. Let's do a quick recap of what we did. Until now, the first live lecture was very high level initially, computers, zeros and ones, conversion compilers, things like these. Basic JavaScript syntax. These 2 things I think were okay enough. Loops, we went a little bit faster, but I covered it again in an offline video. And I introduced callbacks. Callbacks was the biggest yellow thing here, the thing that people were not able to understand. So we tried to put out a few offline videos. Offline video 1 was simple JavaScript APIs, extra functions in strings, objects, arrays, classes. You can always Google these as time goes by, but it was just to provide all of these in a single place. Pretty straightforward video, probably a video you can ignore. Offline session 2 was loops for the people for whom loops was a little bit tricky. Functions, and more specifically, callback functions. This was where callback functions, I think, /hope/assume should be clear, where we did a slightly deep dive into what are callback functions, how are they different from normal functions. And lastly, this is one session I would urge you all to go through again if you haven't already. This covers asynchronous programming, the architecture of JavaScript a little bit specifically in the browser, and promises, which I still feel some people after this video were like, don't understand promises very well, which is why we'll cover it again today. Okay? This is a high level of what we have covered until now. What all do we need to know before we proceed after this? Generally, if you understand callbacks, you're good. You don't really need to know the JavaScript architecture or promises. Good to know. Eventually, you will need it. But as I said, as time goes by, you will go through the syntax in various places and you will get a better intuition of it. But callbacks, at the very least, you need to know. Nahi to as soon as we reach HTTP, or more specifically, as soon as we reach Express, you will be a little confused. And then it's just downhill from there. So make sure callbacks at least you understand, which is how can you pass a function as an argument to another function. Cool. Alrighty. That is what we will start today's class with. Okay. We're going to start again with what are callbacks. This is the first thing we have to cover. Let's look at chat here. Is everyone doing okay? Can we proceed? All right. Great. Okay. Let's proceed. Let's understand callbacks one more time. Look at the code on the right. Can you understand it? Take a minute to understand it. Let me post the link to the slides so you guys can actually copy this gist link and try to do this on your side as well. So let me export PDF. Slides 1. All right, let me stop screen share here. And now let me send it to Rookie, who will create a link for this. Sorry about that. Look at this code base and try to understand what is written. At a high level, there is a square function, there is a cube function, there is a sum of squares function, and finally, I say let answer equal to sum of squares 1, 2, and then I log answer. Cool. I'm going to copy this and put it in Replit. You don't have to. Eventually, Rookie is going to post all the links for today, including this slide on this Discord channel. I think this is the right one. Maybe it's not the right one, but find the Discord channel for today and you will see the slide there. Feel free to download the slide and copy this on your side as well. If you don't, that is totally fine. I'm doing it here. All right, let's go here and let's also go to Replit. I hope by now we understand Replit. At least we have signed up here and we understand you need to click on create REPL Node.js and then create a REPL, which is a place where you can run Node.js code online. Why is this good? So that you don't have to run Node.js code locally on your machine, which, setting up Node.js locally on your machine for the first time can be a challenge, especially for beginners. Okay. Copied this code base, pasted it here, clicked on run. What happened when I clicked on run? It logged 5. That sounds right. What is the sum of, what is this function supposed to calculate? A square plus B square. Is it doing that? Let answer equal to sum of squares. Square 1, what will be the value here? 1. What will be the value here? What is 2 to the power 2? It is 4. What is 1 plus 4? It is 5. It is returning this, and I'm able to log this. Do we understand this function well? If you don't, then give me a no. Otherwise, don't need to post anything. Do we understand this? Okay, good to go, G. Now I say calculate cube also. Like create another function that does the same thing, but for cube. Sum of cubes. And now find that. Can you guess what the answer would be? What is sum of cubes for 1, 2? What is 1 cube plus 2 cube? I think it is 9. And it does log 9. Beautiful. This looks okay. This looks great, actually. What is the problem in this approach? Who will tell me in chat? We've actually covered this, so some of you might already know this. Dry, very good. Dry, just like your, never mind. So the problem here is dry, which stands for don't repeat yourself. All right. What are we doing here? We are repeating ourselves when we write this function and this function. The logic looks very similar. Let something equal to call a function. Let something equal to call a function. Functions are different, but high level structure looks very similar. Do it twice and then return A plus B. We are repeating ourselves here. And what is the general principle in computer science? Don't repeat yourself. If I tell you to ask a third function here called quad, and this returns this thing, and I tell you add another one, you have to add 4 more lines of code. That is not great. You are, 1, to writing this also, 2, rewriting this also. Wouldn't it be nice if I can create a generic function which runs this logic, which is let's something equal to function call 1, let's something equal to same function call with the second argument, and return A plus B. That would be nicer, Kirat. Then I just have to add these functions and to change something here. I don't have to add the second function for any new thing added. For that, what you can do is, you can say, bhaiya, sum of squares, let's call it sum of something. And this will take a third argument as input, which is what function call do you want me to make? I am now a generic function, which means I don't care whether you want to find sum of quad or sum of cube or sum of square. I know you want to find sum of something. Give me that something as input, please. I'm calling it fn here. You can call it anything you want. Fn stands for function. And now this guy says, you give me the input. I will run my logic on it. My goal is to run this logic. You give me what you want me to run this logic on, and you can then pass that as the third argument, which I'm going to say, let's say square. Why is this cool? This is cool because now if I have to, first it does this run. It does not run. Why does this not run? Because I'm calling sum of cubes. Let me run this. And it seems to run correctly. It gives me 5. When I call sum of something with 1, 2, and square, if I call the same thing with 1, 2, and cube, it gives me 9. If I call the same thing with 1, 2, and quad, it gives me 17, I'm assuming, 16 plus 1. So now I can introduce more of these, and I don't have to introduce more of these. I've made this function generic. And how was I able to do that? By introducing a callback. I said, bro, first argument is number, second argument is number. Third argument is a function that I will tell you to calculate the sum of XYZ on. I will give you what you have to do the sum of, on what function you have to do the sum. Could be quad, could be cube, could be square. This is what is called a callback, passing a function as an argument. It is also called functional arguments, which means I'm able to a function, pass another function as an argument. Cool. Let's look at the slides and try to marinate this even further. This is the original function that I showed you. Now can add a sum of cube function to it. When you add it, you get 2 sections here. And what did I say? This is code repetition. This is bad. You might say, okay, how is this code repetition? They are different. Square here, cube here. Yes, but the structure is similar. We saw a few seconds ago how you can, reuse this repeated logic. I do agree that the functions are different. This is not exact repetition, but structure is very similar. Function call, and then return a plus b. Problem code repetition. Can you create a single function, square of something, that does this logic on a function it gets as an input? Important thing to note here. Function it gets as an input. I'm saying sum of squares will get a third function as an input that we can just call here, which is what is called a callback. This is the final code base. Gist is again present in the slides. You can copy it, go to Replit, and try it out on your own machine. The way I would build intuition for this would be, I would log here square called, and then I would pass square here, and then run it. And since I see square called twice, I understand that this fn is actually calling square, not I passed square as the third argument. Cool. This is what a callback function is. This is the first big hump before we actually get into asynchronous programming. So let's complete this section and then do a quick poll. Callbacks. Both are the same. You can do this. You can also do this. You can just call square twice and call it sum of squares if you want. If you do this, okay, you change this function to be a, b, and then callback function, and you pass in square, that will also do the exact same thing. That will literally just replace this with the square, and then square is the function that will get called, which is exactly what is happening here. Take 15 seconds and marinate both the sides of the code base. After the class, try to code this yourself if this still feels a little jarring. All right. So I'll give you a high-level stat. 96% understand, 4% still don't. So I'm going to open chat for just the 4%. Any specific question that is, not clear? Everyone else, feel free to ignore the chat. All right. Someone said something in capitals. Kindly increase the font size of the laptop. I will. Callback hell tricky concept. We will get there. What if I give 2 int values and the third int value only? What will? Okay, great question. Someone said, what if I pass 1 here? Here's what will happen. Okay, what happens if you do this in JavaScript? If you try to call 2 bracket open bracket close, what error comes? Some error will come. Let's try to do that right here. It gives 2 is not a function. Same thing will happen. If you pass 2 as a second argument and try to run it, for the third argument, it will say 2 is not a function. It will try to run 2 here, which, well, you can't really run 2, right? All right. Why do we need a callback for this scenario? Can't we do something like this? Sum of something, some num, or... Oh, great question. Someone else said, okay, Harkirat, why are you complicating this? Just do this. A plus B and call square of 1 and square of 2 here. This will also do the same thing. And then just replace these with cube. You are right. This is a very fabricated example I created to explain this. This will work as well. I can give you a high level KR. You have to call it twice here. In my approach, you only had to, put in arguments. Did not have to. And even if you have to change square to cube, you have to change it in one place. In your case, you have to change it in 2 places. So I can give you such an argument, but generally this is a fabricated example to show what these are. Of course, you can do it different ways. You never really need callbacks in synchronous programming. Whenever you're writing synchronous code, which is what is synchronous code, we will get to, but high level code like this, whenever you are writing code like this, you actually don't need callbacks. You can, somehow make do without passing a function. But this was a fabricated example, which is why you see what you see. All right. I have to proceed here a little bit, but I'm happy to stay back after the class ends for the 5% of the people who still are stuck on this point. Feel free to just get past it and then let's understand the second concept for today, which is async functions. People who did not understand it, there is an offline video that covers it. Today we have covered it. Happy to stay back after the class to cover this again. Feel free, just try to marinate the rest of the concepts. Let's get into asynchronous functions and how are they different from normal functions. Until now, we have only discussed normal functions. What are normal functions, Harkirat? Increase font size. This thing. Num A, B, return A plus B. These are normal functions. Why are they called synchronous functions, Harkirat, compared to asynchronous functions? Because anytime I call this, control reaches here, control whatever reaches here, and they run on the JavaScript thread. As I said in the last class, JavaScript is single threaded. If I write this, how will the thread go? Thread will go here. Thread will go here. It will be like, oh, I have to calculate the sum. It will go here and calculate, return, control will reach here. It will get logged. Then reach the next line. Then sum again. Then here, so on and so forth. The thread is busy. Always. The thread is always executing this function, which is why it is synchronous. Synchronous means, okay, things are happening one after the other after the other. It is also called like sequential. Sequentially, one after the other thing is happening. Okay, it seems like every function is synchronous. Then what is an asynchronous function then? Let me share with you very soon. What is async or asynchronous? Your JavaScript thread doesn't have access to everything immediately. What does this mean, Harkirat? Abhi tak, everything we have done until now, your JavaScript thread is able to go somewhere and do the thing it was supposed to. But if I tell your JavaScript thread, okay, go read a file in my file system. For example, since this is Replit, I can actually create another file here next to index.js. This is similar to in your file system. You go to your folder. Let's say I had an index.js file here. I add another file right next to it, call it a.txt. Let me do that. Next to this file, I'm going to add another file, call it a.txt. And now I want to tell JavaScript, okay, bro, go and read this file. There is some syntax to, do that, but let's ignore that for now. You have to understand the concept here at a high level. Okay, JavaScript, when I run a JavaScript program, when I click on this green button, something starts that is executing this code. That code does not have access to your complete machine. That code cannot be like, I'm going to read your password file. I'm going to read your Facebook password. It needs to ask the OS or the operating system, okay, please let me read this file. Operating system can decide, okay, this file currently someone might be writing to. This file currently might be logged. This file might not be there present at all. Someone might just be deleting it when you're trying to read it. So that JavaScript cannot be like, bro, give it to me immediately and the OS will return it to it immediately. No. JavaScript can ask and OS can return it in its sweet time. Can be 1 second, can be 0.1 second. But OS won't immediately give JavaScript back this file's content. Why is this a problem? This is a problem because if I do whatever, read file a.txt and a console.log hi thereafter, if the operating system says, I am not going to return you this file, your thread will be stuck here. It will be like, I'm waiting for a file. There is a line after it. It won't execute until this comes back. So for operations like this, it is good to convert this into an async call. What does an async call mean? It means, okay, bro, I am going to ask for the file to be read. And till the time it gets read, the operating system decides it has to return me the file. I will proceed and do my other things. Harkirat, you are saying that this code won't completely run. This will partially run. And then the thread will do other things. And then eventually something will happen and this will get rerun. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. You will pass a second argument here, usually, which you can pass like this. As a second argument, an anonymous function, which we have discussed in an offline video. Or you can define the function outside. Function on done content of the file. Console.log content. This code won't run actually. This is a random function you might have created. We've seen later how this actually runs. But generally, whenever you want to do a call like this, you want to ask the operating system for a file or a bunch of other things, it is a good idea to do asynchronous calls, which means, okay, operating system, please read the file. I am going to go and do my other things. And then the thread will proceed here and log hi there. If there is a big for loop here, it will run. It'll keep running, keep running, keep running, keep running. Eventually, the operating system might be like, okay, I'm done. Operating system will somehow tell the JavaScript thread, okay, this is the content, and then our thread will reach here. Harkirat, you're saying on done gets called without me explicitly calling on done somewhere. Yes, you did not have to explicitly call it. You gave it to read file as an argument. And the operating system, whenever it was done reading the file, told you, okay, bhaiya, I am done, yellow, on done. And then control reached here and this got logged. This at a high level is called an asynchronous function. Harkirat, give me more examples. This is just one example. Another example is something we discussed in the past called set timeout. What if I write this function? Set function on done log. Hi there. Set timeout on done 1000. Console.log after set timeout. If I write this function, what will happen? Control reaches here. And this is a function that JavaScript gives you. Don't worry about what it is, how it does. I am telling you this is a function that JavaScript gives you, and it says whatever you give me as the first argument, I will call after 1 second, okay? Or whatever is the argument you pass here. Harkirat, you passed 1000. Yes, because the second argument is expected in milliseconds, and 1000 milliseconds equal to 1 second. So the JavaScript thread should ideally wait here for 1 second. And after 1 second passes, this should get called. And then after set timeout should get called. Ideally, if JavaScript was single threaded, and I said thread reached here, thread cannot reach here unless something new is happening. If we consider JavaScript to be completely synchronous, then thread will reach here. You have said, okay, wait for 1 second, thread will wait here for 1 second, and then this will get logged. This will be true if set timeout was a synchronous function. But should you wait? If there are other tasks that the operating system has to do or the Node.js process has to do, and you are telling it to wait for 1 second, wouldn't it be nice if it can do those other tasks, which could be whatever, do some expensive operation here, which I'm simulating a very big for loop. Wouldn't it be nice if control reached here and it delegated to someone, bro, after 1 second, please call on done. I am going to proceed to my other things. And it did its other things. And eventually, after 1 second passed, control somehow reached here and this got logged. Wouldn't this be nice? This at a high level is an asynchronous function. What are the two asynchronous functions? Let me run this actually. After set timeout gets called, which means control reached here, then some for loop ran, and then eventually hi there ran after 1 second. So thread does not get stuck here is the high level learning here. Okay, thread does not get stuck at something when that something is a asynchronous function. What are the two asynchronous functions we've discussed until now? Set timeout. And I said, if you're ever trying to read a file in your operating system, that also is an asynchronous function, because that also won't immediately return. And you don't want your JavaScript thread to be busy here while the file is being read. All right. That is the second famous asynchronous function that JavaScript gives you. Reading a file. Ignore this for now. Sending a network request. We will come to this when we come to backend, but this is also another thing that is good to be asynchronous. That is good for the thread to not wait on. If I'm currently in India and I go to google.com here, a request goes out to google.com. There is a server in the US that returns me back this HTML and CSS. Whenever I'm sending this request, that is also good to be asynchronous, because I won't immediately get back this. It will depend on my Wi-Fi speed, which could be more, which could be less. So because of that reason, a good idea for these three to be an asynchronous call. High level, do we understand asynchronous call? Let me do a quick poll. %88%, 87%. Cool. Time to open Q&A. So can you please post your questions in Q&A now, because chat will just break everyone's machine. All right. Set timeout works in Node.js environment because set timeout method like DOM. That is good. That is correct. Set timeout does work on questions. Let's focus on questions. Oh, issues in stream that we will have to figure out. What if duration of async call reading the file, there is a line of code which needs to access that file? Yeah. So what if there are two things that are trying to access the file, Kirat? What if I am reading a file and someone else is also reading a file? The operating system will take care of that. It will first lock the file, get the contents, return to one process, and then work on the other file. Good question, by the way. All right. Q&A bhi bhar diya. Can you please explain the async part one last time? Sure. What I said was normal JavaScript that we've written until now. This. This JavaScript goes from the top to the bottom, runs here, goes, this line runs 100 times this time. This is what your JavaScript thread is executing at every millisecond. But there are some functions which are good for the JavaScript thread to not run itself, but delegate. Okay, bhai, someone else do it. This will take a long time. Please do it while I figure out the other things. For example, one such function is set timeout. Okay, bhaiya, call this function after 1 second while I do my own things. So let me pause here and pause chat here. Let me show a basic diagram that hopefully explains this slightly better. I have written some code here, tried to grasp it a little bit. I've said let a equal to 1 console.log a. I have logged something on the screen. Then I've written fs.read file something. Halkiyat, what is fs? Halkiyat, what is read file? Ignore. As I said a few seconds ago, just like set timeout is a function, there could be a read file function to which if you give the file a.txt, it will eventually call your callback with the contents of the file. There are some such functions that JavaScript gives you out of the box, or more specifically Node.js does. This is one such function. Try to marinate this from top to bottom. This is similar to what I wrote a few minutes ago. Some log here, fs.read file. Read this file, and whenever it is read, operating system, please call this function of mine. And then finally, let some expensive calculation here, which is just calculating the sum from 0 to 100 and then logging it. Cool. Let's look at what your JavaScript thread does, how this gets executed from top to bottom. Step 1, thread run 1. What happens when I click on the play button on Replit? Let a equal to 1, console.log a. This runs, fs.read file, a.txt runs. And what does it say? It tells the operating system, okay, please give me the contents of this file. You are the master. You know this file. I don't know. I'm just a simple process. Read this file and please give me the contents. Figure out if someone else is using it, then you give me later. It's fine. If it is logged, it is fine. If it is being deleted, it is fine. Let me know whether or not this file exists. If it does exist, then please give me back the contents. It tells this to the operating system and proceeds. Okay, bhaiya, whenever that will be read, that will be read. It is fine. I'm going to proceed. And it runs its expensive operation. That is all that the JavaScript thread does for the first few seconds or for first few milliseconds. It reaches here and then it sits idle. JavaScript thread is idle. It does not have anything else to do here. It is just waiting. It knows it has a pending callback. It knows it has done an operating system call. It says, I'm idle. I'm waiting. Whenever that happens, I will run this code right here. But for now, I don't know the contents. So I can't do anything. I'm idle. An operating system is busy figuring out where is this file? Does it actually exist? Is someone else locking it? So on and so forth. And lastly, after some time, whenever the OS thinks it found the content, it will call this callback. And then control will reach here and then the JavaScript thread will be alive again. Okay, chalo, now I got back the contents. Let me do whatever I had to do with it, which in this case, we are just logging stuff. But you can, do other things with it. You got the contents of a file. You can manipulate those contents. One of the assignments for this week is read the files of the contents of the file, do something with it, and then write back to the same file. So you can do some magic with it, whatever the assignment might be. But for now, this is the high level of how an asynchronous function call happens. You first to tell someone else, bro, do this. And then you do your own thing after that. And then whenever that guy says, I'm done, you actually do what was in the callback. This is actually the real use case of a callback. Like here, this function looks very weird. Yes, sorry, that is my bad. I've written an arrow function here. You can simply write function here as well. That will work as well. But what I was saying, this is the real use case of callbacks. Asynchronous functions may, you need to tell the other side, you need to tell the operating system, okay, yeah, this is where my code resides, which is why you need callback functions. In synchronous programming, you can always do away with callbacks. You don't really need to send a callback function for someone else to call. But in async programming, where you know, okay, you have delegated a task to someone and they will eventually call back with the data that you asked them for, you need to give them a function. Okay, please, after you're done, please call this function, and then that is what gets called here. All right. This is the high level of how a JavaScript thread would run in this code base. Feel free to take this as a black box. What is fs.read file? Feel free to ignore this arrow function as well. You can simply write an anonymous function here, which is function followed by these arguments followed by curly braces. You can also write that function outside and just give the name of that function here. That would work as well. Harkirat, why is error the first argument? Why is data the second argument? That is the API of this read file function that FS provides you. Harkirat, what is FS? We will get to it when we read Node.js and reach Node.js. Cool. Take a pause. Let me also visualize this slightly better. Let's visualize this on a very nice platform, which also I introduced in the past, but let me reshare. Please go on your machines to this website. That will help you visualize all of the things that I just talked about. It will also show you some extra things about the JavaScript architecture, which is this call stack, web APIs, callback queue, and this thing called the event loop. Don't get overwhelmed. Let's run the code. Let's visually understand what is happening. Cool. It will give you some things on the left. Remove this top section. Keep the console.log high. Keep the console.log hello loop. Keep the set timeout in the middle. If the set timeout anonymous function feels weird, feel free to rename this to whatever. On done. And then pass on done as an argument here. This works as well. Cool. Going to give you guys 15 seconds to do this on your machine. Console.log high. Define an on done function. Say set timeout on done after 5 seconds and console.log. Welcome to the loop. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Great. Beautiful. Click on save and run. Now this website is weird. Sometimes it will just revert the syntax here. Refresh it, try it again. Doesn't work, just follow along on the screen. When I click on save and run, you will see, firstly, look at what lines are being called. Let me do it again. This line gets called first. This line gets called second. This line gets called third. And then after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this line gets called. This looks like the same thing I was discussing in the slides. Okay, yeah, if this is your code base, first 1 runs, then 2 runs, then fs.read file gets delegated to someone, then all the lines after it run, and eventually this thing runs, this callback gets triggered. That is exactly what happened here. If I run it again, first line runs. This also gets delegated somehow in set timeout, and then this line runs. And then after a few seconds, this line runs. But this thing is a little weird. There are a few things happening here. What is this thing on the right? Let's try to understand. Begin with the first one, called stack. So this is just high-level visualizing stuff. You don't need to know this. This is the JavaScript architecture, which I said can be ignored for a really long time. In fact, I came back to this after I was teaching the first cohort to understand this again. Not needed for the longest time. What this sort of architecture is, but it is good to know, especially if you're trying to create intuition for callbacks, asynchronous callbacks. There are 4 high-level things, especially if you're not doing any asynchronous programming, which means if you just write code like this, a equal to a plus 1. Let me just increase the size here. Let a equal to 0, equal to a plus 1. So log a. If you just do this, then only the call stack is what would fill. This is currently what is being called. Run a. Now this is a little. Save and run. A equal to 0 will get initialized as well, and then a plus 1, and then I less than 10, and then a plus 1. Also, I plus plus should run. This doesn't visualize it very well, especially for loops. But as you can see, call stack is the only thing that is being filled with the current line that is being executed. Beautiful. This is the place where you will see everything until you introduce asynchronous functions. So that is why synchronous functions are tough, because they go beyond the call stack. They use this, and this, which is why they're hard to understand and are a bigger concept to understand than simple synchronous functions. Simple synchronous function fills up the call stack. Harkirat, this just feels like every line that is being executed here is being put here. Yes, but if I put this inside a function and then call that function, you will see the thing that reaches the stack first is main, which means this main function got called, and this will remain on the stack until other things come on the top, which means the current line that is being executed. It is called stack for a reason, because it stacks up the function calls. This is the first function call I made. If I make another function call inside, that will get stacked on top of it until that function exits. That is how the call stack runs. This is a general programming concept. C++ also has a call stack, which does something very similar. You put something and then things on the top, which is basically the current line that is being executed. If the current line that is being executed is a function, then that function will appear here at the call stack, and then everything else inside the function will appear on the top. Cool. After this exits, the stack will eventually become empty. The stack is what is the next thing I need to run. That's what the JavaScript needs to know. Okay, what is the next thing I need to run? The thing that is put on the call stack. If you're doing synchronous programming, only this gets used. But if I introduce an async function here, for example, console.log hi followed by set timeout function, console.log hi there from inside after 5 seconds, and then another console.log after. Now you will notice web APIs, callback queue, and this thing come into the picture, the event loop. So let's first understand what are web APIs. Set timeout wasn't really meant to be part of JavaScript. JavaScript has functions, variables, booleans, strings, things like these. Simple synchronous language. Web APIs, this set timeout function, the fs.read file function, which is not exactly a web API, that's actually a Node.js API, but it basically means that JavaScript might need these common functions. So the browser provides them to you. The browser says that JavaScript is simple language, for loop, while loop, if else, strings, booleans, whatever. But I, as the browser, know a person might want to not read a file. You can't really read a file from a browser. But let's say a person might want to create a clock, run this after 5 seconds. So I am going to provide this as a web API. It is something extra that the browser gives you, and Node.js runtime also gives you, but wasn't really part of the JavaScript spec. Came as part of, the web site spec or something like that. This is mostly true. Some nuances here, but high level. The reason it's called a web API, because this is something extra that the browser gives you. Simple JavaScript you can run without this set timeout as well. This is why it's called a web API. And look at this section when I click on save and run. Console.log hi came to the stack, set timeout came on the stack, and something got put here in the web API section and it says anonymous. Too many things happen. Let me increase the clock size to 50 seconds here and then run. After this line ran, you delegated the task to the browser. Okay, bhaiya, maintain a clock for 50 seconds while I run the rest of my code. And the browser is doing that right now. This is delegated to the browser. This is the C++ code of the browser, maintaining this clock and figuring out, that bhaiya, have 50 seconds passed. And when the 50 seconds passed, web APIs, the browser is going to not simply tell JavaScript, yellow, done, execute this. No, it will push this on something called the callback queue, which basically is a place where anyone who's making this asynchronous call can push ke bhaiya, I am done. Here is the callback with your data, which in case of read file is going to be the file content. In case of this is just going to be, please call this callback function. 50 seconds have passed. So after this clock ends in 50 seconds, this gets put here. And there is something called the event loop, which pulls it from the callback queue. Harkirat, why these two things? Why can't this directly put it here? The answer is that JavaScript thread might be busy doing other things. You don't want someone else to come in and interrupt it. If it is busy doing something, it will keep doing its thing. Whoever wants to call a callback needs to put it in the callback queue. Let's decrease this time to 5 seconds. Let's add a for loop after. I have added a sort of an expensive operation after the async call. If I run it now, you will see console.log hi, set timeout, this reaches here, and the thread is busy doing its expensive operation. Even though web APIs say I am ready, please call this callback, the thread won't pick it up. The thread is like, I am busy doing my thing. It will keep doing its thing until the thread actually becomes idle, which means the for loop exits, control reaches here, this gets logged, is when the thread will be like, I am idle. Let me pick things up from the callback queue. It will pick it up and actually execute this line of code. So this at a high level is this, everything that appears here in web APIs is a real asynchronous call. As you can see, finally got pulled from here, reached here and got logged. These things that are present here are asynchronous functions. Harkeet, why do we need them? Why can't I do it directly here on the call stack? Because then the call stack will remain stuck here and you won't be able to do these expensive operations after. Your thread will be stuck here, which is why it is good for the thread to delegate this task to someone else. Cool. That's a high level of asynchronous functions. The one that we discussed right now is set timeout. The other one that I introduced to you, which will also be part of the assignments, is this read file function, which actually reads a file. Let me show that as well before we proceed. We will also take a break very soon. I added a.txt file here. Let me write some code. You don't have to write it, but you can later on after the class. I'm doing something at the top here. Const fs equal to require fs. Harkirat, what is this? Never seen require before. This is that some smart people have written this file system library. I am importing it. Harkirat, why did you not have to import set timeout? Because this is not a common use case. So it is good for it to be not present in the global scope, which is, available everywhere. Whoever needs it can import it, which is exactly what I've done here. This gives you a fs.read file function, which if you pass this as the syntax, now what is UTF-8? Why is ERR the first argument here? This is just the syntax of the FS library. It is what's called an error first callback, which is some callbacks, some libraries, this is just a pattern. Okay, a lot of times if there is a callback, the first function will be an error. This is how the read file, whoever has written the contents of this is how they call back the function. If there is an error, that is the first argument. If it was able to read the file, that is the second argument. Comma here. Let me run this and see what happens. Nothing happened. Oh, it did happen. No. Run. Oh, nothing got logged. I smell a bounty. Opening chat here. What have I done wrong? Okay, few good questions first. If Node.js is single-threaded, how is it performing synchronous tasks and async tasks simultaneously? Great question. It is not performing the async task. It is on this line telling the web API to do an asynchronous task. So this line does get executed. Set timeout does get executed. And the job gets delegated. The thread goes on to do these things. Asynchronous task is being handled by someone else. More specifically, as I said, the C++ code of the browser is maintaining that clock. And in case of the fs.read file call, it is the operating system. Good question. Does JS work line by line for synchronous functions? Yes. This line, then this line, then this line, then this line, then this line, this line. Yes, it does run it does run by line. Which place do we need async await? We will come to it by the end of the class. All right. Let me try this one more time. Require fs. Read file, this, then gets logged. File contents don't get logged. Missing something very, there you go. File is empty. That is why. Hi there from a.txt. Was anyone able to guess it? No, never mind. Okay. The file was empty. Now let me run it again. And I log both error and data. And data does give me this. But as you can see, first done gets called. So control reached here, and then eventually when the file was read, control reached here. Why is error null? Because there is no error. If I replace this with a1.txt, a file that does not exist, and if I run it, then I do see an error get logged. I don't see any data. This thing that you see here is the error, and data is undefined because the file is not present there. Cool. Let's take a breather. Let me see if there was more. No, that was it. First section of the class is done. The only jarring concept that's left now is promises. Going to open chat for questions. So any questions related to the things we've done until now. For example, a good question was, okay, how are asynchronous functions being called if there is a single thread? Any question like this? So opening chat for that. All right. That was very quick. Okay. Trying to avoid people of pasted questions here, and just answering high level questions. If you pasted a code here, then it will be hard for me to judge it. What does enonet mean? Enonet means the file is not present. It's just a status code for file not present. Feel free to Google it. Don't have to. It's just an error. Why is it called ENOENT? I'm sure this has a full form. It's just a status code for the file not being present. Repeat how we handle those web APIs when we are not interacting with the browser, but the desktop app or something like that, where we don't have access to the browser. So desktop app, if you're writing in JavaScript, there's a good chance you're writing it in a website only, and then it's being converted into native somehow. If that is not the case, you're really creating a desktop app in JavaScript, then the same. There will be a single thread executing the normal things. And all these tasks like reading from the file system will be delegated to either the operating system. And if it is not the browser, then it is the operating system that the task is being delegated to. And then the operating system is doing that specific thing. If 10 processes are there and one process is async followed by 9 sync process, so will the third sync process be executed when the async callback comes back? Great question. I just answered it. Console log high on the stack, this on the stack. Let me decrease this to, well, this looks fine. Look at what's happening here. This gets called, and then my expensive operation is happening. Your callback 1, callback 2, callback 3, whatever synchronous functions you have will keep getting executed. Callback will wait in the queue. Callback will only come here after the thread becomes idle. So if you have 10 different synchronous function calls after your async function calls, first all 10 of them will run, and then the event loop will pull something from the callback queue. These things will be stuck here until your thread becomes idle. These cannot in the middle come like and be like, oh, run my thingy. Okay. What if there are multiple async calls? Great question. Yellow G. There are 2 async calls. One after 5 seconds, one after 10 seconds. Notice the web API section. It is now maintaining 2 clocks. Web APIs, C++ code can do multiple things, is doing multiple things. Maintaining 2 clocks, put one function on the callback queue, will put the second function on the callback queue. Both the functions will keep waiting here. If there are 10 async calls you make, they will all be waiting here in the callback queue, and then they'll get pulled one by one. Great question. Please clean your dock. Oh, the thing at the bottom. Sure, I will. The on and set timeout FSD async by design, or do we need to use async function? They are async by design. What does async mean? Harkirat, someone asked. Until there are 2 keywords in JavaScript, we will discuss very soon, await and async. Someone said, do I need to make this asynchronous by adding these keywords, or is it already asynchronous? It is already asynchronous. It is doing something which is eventually coming back. It is doing something which is off the main JavaScript thread. That means it is asynchronous. Is there any priority in the callback queue? I think the first come, first serve. So if I rerun this, the first thing that is put there is the thing that will get pulled from here. I could be wrong, but 99% that is true. But yeah, simplify, you mean the async will be executed at the last and all the other functions will get executed up. Correct. But the async thing is actually already being executed by web APIs. If it was a file system read, something else is doing it, either the operating system or web API. Something else is doing it parallelly. But the callback, yes, only after the stack has been exhausted, only after this synchronous calls are done. If there are 20 synchronous calls after that, only after all of them are done, do these get picked up from the call stack. Does async function won't return anything? Sorry, could you elaborate on the question? Don't think we'll get the time, but let's see. Break ho gaya. This is break until 8 to 5. So 7-minute break. I'm just answering questions until then. Does then callback queue uses RAM? Callback queue uses RAM. So when web APIs is doing something, maintaining a clock, yes, it is using some RAM, it is using some CPU core as well. When you put it on the callback queue, good question. I don't know. Maybe there is some effort here of maintaining the callback queue. It is which is happening on another thread. I'm not sure. Good question, but like very deep question. Can you give some more examples of real world use cases of async functions? Type your question here. Real world use cases. The real world use cases are much more different than coding use cases. I've given one very good example in video 1.5 on the website. So I would urge you to go here and go through week 1.5 video. This has a very good real world example of creating Maggie and chopping vegetables, which I think is as real world as it gets. Can we nest an async function inside an async function? Great question. What if I do set timeout? This is also an assignment, by the way. But yeah, what if I do this? I say set timeout. After 5 seconds, run this. And then once control reaches here, then do another async call. Let's see. This sort of is messed up right now, the stack. Let me refresh. Close. And then let me run this. What have I done? I said set timeout. Log something. And then do another set timeout. Wait for another 10 seconds. And then log something. Run. Console.log hi. Only one thing reached here. Because set timeout has only been called once. The inner set timeout hasn't been called yet. Only when this reaches here does the control reach here. And then the second set timeout will get called. And then that will reach the web APIs. So this is, I think the visualization should make it clear. If not, let me know. But you can call async, inside async. And this is what is called callback hell. So great introduction to callback hell by our friend Rajdeep Das. Okay. What happens if we have one async call? Then what is the real world use case of this? It is, first do something, then wait for 5 seconds. And then do something, and then wait for 5 seconds. This is an assignment from this week as well. So if you go to this, our assignments repo, 100x devs cohort 2/assignments, and you go to week 2, you will see there is an assignment here. No. 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 Never mind. I've been mistaken. Let's see. Sorry, I might have been mistaken. I mean, there is one, but if I explain it, it has some promises in it, so it will be a little hard. Going to proceed now. In async function, what if all the remaining code dependent on read file or ever command will repeat again. In async, what if all the remaining code is dependent on the read file? Exactly. Great question. Hakirat, what if all the remaining code is dependent on the read file function? Then you will write all the remaining code in the callback. That is the point of the callback. You do whatever you want with the data here. You let the thread be idle after that. If the remaining code is dependent on this, you cannot run the remaining code until you get back the data. So you will write all the remaining code inside these braces. Good question, sir. What that file will be accessed at the same time if easily available, or it will be accessed later. So that just depends on the operating system. If this file is available immediately, it will. If someone else has logged it, if some other process is trying to access it, then it will, you won't get it back immediately. What if I want data in one async task, in another async task? Great question. What if I want the data that comes here to be logged after 1 second? Or now I definitely know there is an assignment for this. What if I want easy, medium, file cleaner? Look at this code base. What does it say? Read a file, remove all the extra spaces, write it back to the file. This is exactly what you're saying. What if I want to read a file? Then the data content that I get, I want to add something to the data. Data equal to data plus Harkirat was here. And then I want to rewrite back. Then you will do as you can see, the AI was also telling me fs dot write file You'll just write back to the file. This is another async call to write back to the file. That also the operating system will take some time. So then you will have the other async call after the first async call. They don't really communicate. It is that all the rest of the logic that needs the data will have to run inside the callback. That is the purpose of the callback. Okay, anyone who needs this data will have to run here. They can't really run outside this curly braces unless you use async await syntax, which we'll come to. What if one async function? Okay, that answered that. We have 1 more minute and then we will proceed. I'll also do a poll after this. What if set timeout took less time than the next expensive call? Then which I answered this a few times, but let me share it one more time. Okay. Here, if you look at it, set timeout doesn't take as much time as the expensive operation. Expensive operation, even though it's 10, this thing on the right is executing it really slowly. So look at the thing on the right. Hi got logged, set timeout reached here. And now the expensive operation is happening. This callback, this async function cannot interrupt this synchronous call. This will keep happening. This guy cannot interrupt it. This guy can just wait in the callback queue. That is the purpose of the callback queue. Okay, web APIs cannot simply push to the call stack. Web APIs can simply put it somewhere, and then event loop, whenever the thread is free, will pull it. If the thread never gets free here, if there's an infinite loop here, infinite loop will run. This will never reach here. All right, good question, but I think it's repeated a few times now. 8:05. Let's do a poll. And as I said, I will also, at the end of the class, answer a few more questions. We're doing okay, not great. We're at 88%, which means 12% is still lagging. Totally fine. We will take more doubts at the end. Let me finish the rest of the things for everyone. I'm happy to come back to it. I see a few questions in Q&A as well. Oh, screen not moving, black screen screen is stuck. Oh, okay. I'm pausing. No video for since 5 minutes. Oopsie daisy. Pause. Alrighty. Thank you guys. No worries. I have local recording. I will post it. Thank you for letting me know. Where is my phone? Rookie is getting fired today. Why did he not come? I'm kidding. Let's see. Oh, someone did call me. Who is this? Oh, all right. ठीक है भाई. So the last 5 minutes screen wasn't being shared. Let me try to reshare here. Opening chat. Can you now see my screen? Sorry about that. What I was saying for the last 5 minutes was at a high level, just basically repeating a few things. And the biggest thing I was repeating was this K. If there is some synchronous call that is happening here, does not matter if an async call is waiting in a callback queue, does not matter if this callback is ready to be executed, will not execute until the stack becomes clear or, synchronous calls are finished. Only when all the synchronous calls are finished, when the thread becomes idle, is when this guy will pull it from here to here. That was the high level thing I was discussing. Other thing I was discussing was, okay, there is an assignment, which I don't know, you guys probably did not see it. This is the assignment, which is read a file, remove all the extra spaces, write back to the file. So here you will first read the file. After you have read the file and you got access to the data is when you will rewrite it. So anytime you need access to this data, you will have to wait for it to come back. All the code that needs it, one async call followed by another async call, needs to happen here itself. It cannot happen outside. You cannot read data here and access it outside. All that code that needs access to this data, if there is an async call that needs to happen after another async call and needs data from the other async call, all that code for this, that will be here. For example, in the assignment for solution for this, it will be something like this. You will update data with something followed by fs.write file. Cool. All right. Sorry about that. Let me do a poll one more time and then we will proceed. Relaunch poll. Screen is still sharing. Let me also remove my phone from DND. All right, still at 90%. The So we'll take doubts after the end. Let's complete promises one more time and then do some assignment questions. And then at the end, we'll take questions for all the people who are still stuck at callback and async. Cool. I think there are very repeated similar questions, so should be easy to grasp later. Let's get into promises. You can work without this after as well. Callbacks are enough. Promises are just syntactical sugar on top of async. What does syntactical sugar mean, Akiyat? It means it is a cleaner way to write callbacks. Under the hood, promises get converted into callbacks. It is after a few years when people realize that callbacks are ugly. Callbacks have something called callback hell, which a few people discussed today. People thought, there needs to be a better way. And other languages like Rust introduced, even C++, I think, introduced some async await syntax for asynchronous calls. So for that reason is when JavaScript said we need something similar, and they introduced callbacks. All right. So promises were introduced in some years, 2017, 2018, I don't know, like somewhere in some year onwards, promises were introduced. Before that, people would just use callbacks. This is how JavaScript programming was done for years. But later on, a cleaner syntax came called promises. Let's start with a question. I know some of you are feeling like this. This is an AI generated photo, which is why you see two eyes here. But this is jarring. If you don't understand it this week, it is fine. You can make do for a few weeks with callbacks. Eventually, it might be good to understand. What are promises? Just syntactical sugar. Under the hood, get converted into a better way to write asynchronous calls, like we just saw. Just a more readable way to write asynchronous calls. You can write JavaScript without them by using callbacks. Let's start with the question: how would you create your own async function? Until now, we've only used asynchronous functions. We have used two of them: set timeout and fs.readfile. How can you write an asynchronous function of your own, a function that works off of the JavaScript thread? Long story short, very weird way to, you can write a function of your own that works off the main thread, but usually whenever you write asynchronous functions, you actually use one of these functions under the hood. For example, I could write a function that says function read and then write to file. And then under the hood, it will use both fs.readfile and then fs.writefile. This is one way to write asynchronous functions. I might take in a callback here, and then, after the write file, I might actually call the callback. But under the hood, I'm still using fs.readfile. So usually 99.9% of the time, at least in your programming journey or like my programming journey, whenever you're writing asynchronous functions, you are just wrapping around other asynchronous functions and, doing something with it. For example, you have introduced a new function here called read and then write to file, put some copyright there, let's say, or like put copyright to file. This function's purpose is to read a file, and at the end, write copyright 2020 Harkirat Singh, and then write back to the file. You have created an asynchronous function of your own to which someone sends a callback. You read the file, add some data to it, write to the file, and then call the callback. So someone else can, be like, put copyright to call and then pass a function ke bhai console.log copyright has been put. This is one way for you to write asynchronous functions of your own, but under the hood, you are using other asynchronous functions. Harkirat, I want to create my own. I want to create one function that does something on the operating system thread that is other than the JavaScript thread. You don't. Trust me. I spent a lot of time today trying to find, like, I was wondering, how do you write a real asynchronous function? And I could not find a good answer. There are ways, which is what, Google and ChatGPT told me. I did not go to the depths of it. Never in the last 6 years have I gone into the depths of how do you go across the main thread and, do something and ask the JavaScript asks, and you create a raw async function. No idea. When you're creating async functions, usually just wrap around another async function to create something new, a new functionality, which I just did. Okay, I created a function that now anyone can call and, put a copyright text at the end of a file. This is one ugly, big function. Let's look at a smaller function that you can Create so that you can say, okay, I have written my own async function, Harkirat. Approach number 1, wrapping another async function. Let's look at a simpler one. I wrote a lot of logic here, fs.read file, fs.write file. Let's look at a simpler one. I say function my own set timeout. I take a callback as an input. I take a duration as an input. And I simply call set timeout with the function and the duration. I am just wrapping around set timeout. I'm creating my own set timeout, which under the hood just calls set timeout. I have created my own asynchronous function. I agree, it is dumb. Who would write this? Why would I not call set timeout directly, Harkirat? Why would I call your function? I get it. It's very dumb, but just to show okay, you can create asynchronous functions. This function that you have created is now an asynchronous function because under the hood, it is calling set timeout. Harkirat, do you mean my function is what will go to the web API section on Lupe? If I call this my function, will my own set timeout function reach here? No. Still, set timeout will reach here. But technically, you can say, okay, whoever is calling this will eventually give me a callback and proceed. So technically, my own set timeout is an async function. But will my own set timeout ever reach here? No. My own set timeout will never reach here. Set timeout is what will actually reach. I think now. Let's not go. One of the two most probably, my own set timeout will not reach here. 99.9%. Set timeout is what will actually reach here and actually get pushed back to the callback queue. This approach uses a callback. You have created your own function, but you have used callbacks, which is the thing we've discussed until now. We have not discussed promises. We have not discussed async await. We have only discussed promises. Callbacks. And this approach uses that. You have created your own function that takes in a callback and calls that callback after some time. And whoever is calling it can actually proceed to do other things. And after some time, will this console.log hi there get called? You have created a function where other people can send a callback. This is good, but could lead to callback hell. This was one of the ways it was justified that we are moving from callbacks to promises. Okay, promises are the better way to write asynchronous code because callbacks introduce callback hell. But what is callback hell? Let's discuss this a little bit. What if I tell you, create a function that logs something after 1 second and then wait for 2 seconds to log another thing? I say, write a function. This isn't the best explanation, but chalo, I liked this one better. The one that, never mind. Let's do this. I say set timeout. After 1 second, log something either. And after this log happens, then after 2 seconds, log something else. So basically another set timeout inside the second one. And this might keep going. I might ask you, after the second log happens, then do the third one. Harkirat, why would I do this? I would simply do one set timeout that is after 1 second, and then another set timeout that is after 3 seconds. Why do you want me to first this logs after 1 second, and then after 1 second and this has logged, then after 2 seconds, do you want me to log this? Why can't I simply do this? I would say, yes, you are right. But let's say I force you to. And also, this is not exact. Both of these won't exactly be the same because, after 1 second, first this line will run and then this second clock happens. So, the total time taken for this won't be 3 seconds. It will be slightly more than that because some time was taken to log this as well. So this is what I asked you to do. And this is the code that you wrote. Okay, first set timeout call, inside which I do a hi there, and then another set timeout call after the hi there, after which I do this. Let's copy this and paste this to Lupe. We actually did this a while back. Let me run it again. Oh my God, this site isn't the best. Okay, there we go. Run. What happened? Reached here, got pulled here. Hi there ran. Another set timeout reached here. 2 seconds passed, came here. Does do what I want it to do. Okay, bhai, first log this, then start another clock, and then log this. You will see many use cases when this happens. A few people asked in the chat, okay, what if one async function needs the response from another async function? How do they communicate? The answer is this. Okay, after the first async function happens, you put code inside. And then after the second async function happens, you might have to put one more async call here. Can you see very bad nesting here? one after the other, there is very bad nesting. You're moving one level after the other. This looks very ugly. Wouldn't it be nice if I could write this code something like this? So wait for 1 second and then log the first thing, and then wait for 2 seconds and then log the second thing, and then this thing. Wouldn't it be nice if I could write code like this rather than writing indented code like this? Like, yeah, that would be nice. But if you write code like this, wouldn't the thread be very busy here for 1 second before it proceeds to the next thing? Aren't you making the thread very busy? This doesn't sound like an asynchronous call. You are saying, okay, anything after this runs after this thing proceed, sort of this thing, this line runs, then this line runs, and seems like you are saying, okay, the thread will be stuck here for 1 second. How is this an async call then? You are waiting, actually making the thread await here. Good question. That is not exactly what we are doing. We will see how you can write syntax like this without losing the asynchronous properties. We can write syntax like this, yet when the code is stuck here, you can do other things. Your JavaScript thread can do other things. And then once this is done, control reaches here, then the thread is not stuck here. It can still do other things. And then control reaches here. Promises let you do this. They let you convert code that looks something like this to something like this. How? We will see through something called the async await syntax, which we will get to. But high level, this is the need of promises. Can you do without them? Yes. But if you do without them, you will see code like this. You will very quickly start to see callback inside callback, because asynchronous functions are very common, especially in backend systems. So very quickly your code will become very ugly. And that is the reason why it is good to know how to create asynchronous functions that use promises and call asynchronous functions that return promises technically. Okay? That's the high level of why you need promises. We will get to the syntax very soon. What if I tell you create a function that logs something? Okay, we saw that. Never mind. Callbacks lead to unnecessary indentation. This is what is called callback hell, which is what you just saw. Let's see how promises fix that. That is the high level question we need to understand. Okay? How do promises fix that? This was the approach number 1. Okay. What if I tell you to write a function that wraps set timeout? You say I have wrapped it right here. And I have a set timeout function, my own set timeout, which under the hood calls the other set timeout. This is the other approach. This uses promises, and this is going to be jarring. Pehle up front. Take a breather here. Try to notice the difference between the thing on the left and thing on the right. Both do very similar things, yet are very different. But under the hood, the thing on the right is somehow using the things on the left only and converting this code into the things on the left. Promises are just syntactical sugar. They make things slightly cleaner to understand / appear, even though it might feel like here the thing on the left seems much cleaner than the thing on the right. But in the longer run, you will see how promises lead to much more cleaner code, especially when it comes to async function call, inside async function call, inside async function call. Cool. Now the thing on the right might feel very jarring, very ugly. So let's start with both the sections of the thing on the right. There are 2 things I've done on the right. Number 1, I've defined a function, an asynchronous function that under the hood you still use a set timeout, but I've defined this asynchronous function. Number 2, I've called the asynchronous function, and look at how I've called it here. It's very different to how I've called it here. Both these things change when you use callbacks. Okay? Let's first try to understand how do you define an async function that uses promise. Let's go back to the code base. Let me first write a simple async function, my own set timeout, that uses a callback, which is something we just saw a few slides ago. Takes a callback as an input, takes a duration as an input, and simply calls set timeout on callback and duration. You have created an async function of your own that under the hood does the same thing that set timeout does. This is cool. This is work. Whoever is calling it needs to call it like this. After set timeout, and then pass in a duration here. This is one way of doing it. Let's see how you can what's called promisify this async function. Very common term. You will see this throughout. Some open source code base is there, and someone is like, this function uses a callback. Let's promisify it. So the first big difference between a function like this and a promisified async function is, let me call this promisified my own set timeout. The first big difference between these two will be, yahan pe a callback is expected. Here you don't expect a callback. You will still expect the duration argument, how many milliseconds after which something should be called, but you will not accept the callback here. Kirat, if you don't accept the callback here, how will the person who is calling it actually run something after duration second has passed? We will see very soon. This function, whenever I say कि promisify something, this function will return what's called a promise. Kirat, what is a promise? What exactly is a promise? You've been saying promise so much. Promise is just another class in JavaScript. Do you remember the date class? I did a const d equal to new date in one of the offline videos, and then d dot get month. If I log this, it gives me the current month of the year, which right now would be 12 or 11 based on the indexing. Just like this is a class, promise is also a class that JavaScript provides you out of the box. So you can be like const p equal to new promise. Okay. First high level thing, const p equal to new promise, return p. No logic written yet, but this function is returning a promise. What is it returning? A promise. Harkiyat, what did this function return? Returned undefined. It does not return anything. There is a set timeout call, but there is no return statement at the very end. Return 0, return 1, no. Not, returns nothing. This returns a promise. Let's go to the iPad here. I am telling you two ways to create async functions. Way number one, non-promisified. Way number two, promisified. When you define a function here, it does not return anything, but it takes callback as an input. Versus a promisified function does return a promise, does not take callback as an input. For this guy right here, callback is the way to tell the caller कि bro something has been done. For this guy right here, the promise that it returns is the way how the caller will eventually get the callback, how the caller will actually know that this function has done its asynchronous call. That's a high level difference between the caller here and the caller here. This one will send a callback as an input. This one will receive a promise as an output. So here you send something, कि भैया whenever it is done, please call it. Here this guy sends you something, कि bro, tell me what you want to do after the thing is done. I am doing my thing, but you tell me what you want to do, what you want me to call after I'm done doing my thing. So let's look at how you actually call a promisified function. More specifically, first let's understand how do you define it. I've done nothing right now. I've said const p equal to new promise, return p. Now this is syntax of promise that you need to understand a little bit for the next 10 seconds. It's going to be jarring. Promise is a class. We've discussed classes a little bit in our offline video. New promise creates an instance of that class, and that is what I return. Now new promise expects the first argument to be a function inside which the first argument needs to be resolved. There are other arguments, but don't worry about them. This much you have to sort of just put in your brain. This is how you initialize a promise. Just how you initialize a date like this. It does not expect any inputs when you're initializing it. Promise does expect an input when you initialize it. And that input that it expects is also a callback function, which you can just give it to it right here. And that function also needs to have resolve as the first input. This is very confusing. This is new promise, which has a function which has the resolve as the first argument. Yes. This is the only sort of syntax that gets a little confusing. Let me write some more code and then maybe this becomes slightly cleaner. What do I have to do? I have to wait for duration seconds and then tell the other person, ki, bro, I am done. Whoever is calling it, I have to tell them, ki, bhaiya, I am done. Please call your callback. So inside the function here, I will say set timeout, resolve duration. I say ki after duration seconds, call resolve. which is this function right here. I could also write this resolve. This is the meat of the logic, which is the same as this thing right here. Here also I could be like this. Okay, after duration, callback. The meat of the logic here and here is same. But here you're calling resolve, which is something that this promise object gave you. Here you were calling callback, which is something that the end user gave you. Why is the syntax so different for both of them? Because the way you call both of them is also different. How do you call the first one? First one is as simple as doing this. My own set timeout, send the function, and then the duration. Hopefully this is clear. How you define a simple asynchronous function, how you call a simple asynchronous function that has a callback. But if you ignore this, this is the promisified function. How do you call this function? Normally, const answer equal to this thing and pass in the duration, which could be 1 second. Question is, where is the callback, Harkirat? Where do I tell this guy, ki bro, call this logic once you're done? And the answer is, you call dot then on the promise that is returned to you. What would answer be? What would the type of answer be? If I log answer here, what will I see on the logs? I will see promise. Let me log it actually. Let's just log what this guy returns to you. Let's ignore this function. Let's just focus on the promisified function for now. I have created a promisified function. This guy returns something here, which I get in this variable, and I'm going to log it. If I run, what do I see on the right? I see it says promise pending, which is the log I put right here. How do I close this? There you go. The log that I put here says promise pending. It means I got an instance of this class, and it also says pending. That is what I got in this answer variable. Question still remains, Harkirat. How will this guy tell this guy that 1 second has passed or some time has passed? For that, as you can see, AI is telling me, this is again the syntax of using promises. Just how in callbacks, you send in a callback function. Here, the function returns you a promise, and then you say promise dot then, which means after this is done, then do whatever you want. Timeout is done. This is just a different syntax of doing asynchronous functions. Number one, defining them. Number two, calling them, which is slightly cleaner than the old one. Might not feel cleaner, might feel like this is much more jarring, much more difficult to understand. But this is what leads to finally the async await syntax or something called promise chaining, both of which get rid of callback hell. We will try to discuss as much of this we can today, but you don't have to know that. What you need to know is that, bhaiya, this is how you define asynchronous functions. This is how you call asynchronous functions. 99% of the time, you don't have to define them. What you really need to know is how do you call them, which is const answer equal to something, and then answer dot then the callback function, compared to doing this. This is something we've done a few times now. Having a callback. This is something which we need to do from now on. If you understand this, how you call a function that returns a promise, that is great. Defining a function that returns a promise of its own is a whole different ballgame. Don't need to worry about that just yet. The biggest thing you need to know is how can you call a function that returns a promise and how you can give it a callback. This is the way to sort of give it a callback. Ke bhaiya, after you're done, please run this. If you understand this, great start. You'll be sorted for a few more weeks. Now let's take a pause and open chat. This is the biggest meat of the thing we had to discuss today. Iske baad it's assignment solving and a little bit of, let's see, what was it? Some JS functions, which also, frankly, we can cover in an offline class. The biggest thing is promises. So let's take a pause here. Let's open chat here. If you understand this, fine. Iske baad I'm just going to solve assignment questions. You can come back to it in the recording of the video. But whoever did not understand promises, can you give me very specific questions as to what part feels like jarring, other than the syntax? So syntax is going to be jarring. But anything specific other than that, that makes it difficult. All right, create a bunch of questions. I do apologize. I know from a bunch of you saw the screen and then immediately went away. That is how it might have to be. Feel free to ping TAs in your specific discords if you have other sort of very specific questions. Can't we get async await functions? Yes, we can, but we're not getting there yet. We're just understanding promises for now. Sir, kindly explain callbacks in fs.read file once. Sure. fs.read file, a.txt, UTF-8, and then the callback. What do you say? You say read file, read it in this format. Whenever it is done, let me clean this up a little bit. Whenever this is done, control should reach here. This is the callback that you sent. Wouldn't it be nice? It won't really be nice, but if read file was promisified, then you would have done something like this. Dot read file, a.txt, UTF-8, dot then function, data. I get this is jarring, but this is just another way to do this. fs.read file does not return a promise, so this won't work. But in case it did, in case it was one of those modern functions that does not use callbacks, but uses promises, then you could have done this. There is actually a library out there called something like fs-promisify that gives you syntax like this. But high level, this would be the difference if read file was a async function, what is versus a promisified function. What are some scenarios that you would prefer to use synchronous code over asynchronous code? You will always use synchronous code until, for now, for a really long time, until you have to do three things. Sleep/wait for some time. Do a network call, which we will discuss eventually what this is. And by call, I mean like call, not call. Like call means like function call, remote function call. And lastly, read a file. These are three high-level things that for the longest time, maybe one more thing, which is a database call. Now, what is this? What is this? We will come to when we reach backend, but at a high level, these are the only 4 cases where you need to do asynchronous calls. Other than that, you just write synchronous code throughout JavaScript, which is why like 99% of the time, not 90, 95% of the time you're writing synchronous code. 5% of the time you're writing async code. Is maybe you can just do away with callbacks. You don't really need promises, but good to know promises. A lot of libraries sort of only expose promises and don't expose callbacks. So for them, you need to know at least how to call it. As long as you know how to call a promisified function, you should be fine. Let's keep the okay. Where is the reject parameter? Great question, sir. So we introduce a few more things, but again, don't need to worry about this for the longest time. At a high level, you saw here कि भैया this had 2 parameters, error and data. Harkirat, dot then says कि हाँ ठीक है, this should get called. But again, it says dot then here. This should only get called if the file actually got read. If there was an error, you can either do this, but usually whenever there is an error, the promisified function will not call then, it will call something called dot catch. And then here is where the error gets called again. Don't worry about this. If you're stuck in that, if you don't understand promises yet or dot then yet, don't even worry about dot catch. Don't even worry about something called the reject. For now, just focus on itna. That too, just if you can do an fs.read file. If you can do this very easily, you can understand rejects very easily. You can understand the pending state, things like these. At a high level, whenever you're let n equal to new promise function resolve. Whenever you have a promise and you log it, you will see one of 3 states on it. Either pending, which you see right now, or if I call resolve here and then I log it, you will see missing something obvious here again, but let me just go to the questions and come back. Think about why did n not get logged here? Again, something small I'm missing, like file is not correct, or maybe it is getting logged. No, it is not getting logged. Never mind. Going to leave it, and eventually might open a bounty for this. But don't worry if you don't get a bounty. It's fine. It's too much people. Trust me. Don't worry about $20. Just focus on the class for now. Duration instead of 1000 in set timeout. Sorry, you did not understand it, Akshay. So just going to be Q&A until the end of the class, however long it might be. So feel free to drop off, guys. Feel free, especially 90% of the people seem like already understanding, maybe not promises. Let me do a poll again. And for the people who do understand everything, the assignment has already been posted. So try to go to here. It introduces a few concepts like promises and, something called busy waiting. This is a good assignment, basically. Try to do this. There aren't any tests for this, but clearly it is been explained what you have to do. So for the people who understand, feel free to drop off. Going to do a quick poll and then Q&A after that. Tomorrow onwards, we will start Node.js. So if you understand this or not, you should come to tomorrow's class, but tomorrow's class might get a little more interesting. And so now a good chunk of people, because promise was introduced. So for the 30% of the people who don't understand, stick, and everyone else, feel free to drop off. This is the class. Might solve a few questions in the assignment here at the end, but you can just come back to the recording. Okay? Thank you for joining. And if you want to stay, but please ask questions related to the doubts now. So I want to really focus on the 30% who's now stuck here. We'll try to answer a few questions. Delegation of task / context switching is done on different threads or on the same thread. It different white is still called single threaded. So delegation of the task, you sending web API, something to web APIs is done on the main thread. If you look at it, set timeout does get logged here. If I go back here, set timeout does reach the callback. It reaches here. So that is your main thread delegating the task. But once the task is delegated, it is happening on a different thread. Any use case of promises in synchronous programming? No. Only for asynchronous programming. You can immediately resolve and do something like some sort of a synchronous programming, but no, it is for async programs only. What if async function executes in 5 seconds, but normal sync function takes a huge time, and then callback you will hold the result of the async function till the normal sync function gets free? It's not efficient, right? What do we do in such situations? You can't do anything. If you really want, an async function call, as soon as it happens, it immediately happens and is able to interrupt the thread. So there, realistically, your thread moves very fast. It never will it be stuck in an expensive call after, because expensive call, whatever it is, even if it's a million for loop iterating for a million, gets cleared very quickly. But to answer your question, no, it will get stuck in the callback queue. But it's like so minuscule. Like if you ever actually look at the stats, your JS thread is idle most of the time. If you run a backend server, if you're doing something, there will be a lot of times where your JavaScript thread will be idle because it moves very quickly. So you will never actually see something being stuck in the callback queue for a really long time. But to answer your question, if there is an expensive operation happening here, thread is busy there, there is no easy way for something to come in the callback queue and interrupt this thing. I think there's a way you can flush the callback queue. I'm forgetting it, but I think there is a way to just, flush every few seconds to flush the callback queue and then come back to the synchronous code. But practically, never does this become a problem. Never will you have an expensive operation that is blocking the thread for, multiple minutes. You said delegate this task to someone else. Who is someone else? Great question. What does it say here? Web APIs. So who is someone else in this case? It is your browser. When you call set timeout and you delegate this task to the browser, it is your browser's C++ code. What language is Chrome written in? C++. It is this C++ code that is running on a different thread and maintaining this clock while your JavaScript thread is executing everything else. Similarly, when you do an fs.read file, it is your operating system that is, hitting the kernel, doing a syscall to actually read the file and giving it back to you. Do browsers and Node.js provide different or same web APIs? Great question. They provide different. You can never read a file from here, from, the browser. That would be a huge security implication. If I go to facebook.com and Facebook can access read files of mine, then Mark Zuckerberg has all my private photos, which I don't want, or my Bitcoin keys. So for that reason, websites don't have the access, which means JavaScript in the browser does not let you read files. Node.js does let you read files. So there are different set of APIs that are written on top of the main JavaScript based on the environment that you are in, be it browser or be it Node.js. Do promise also go to the callback queue? Great question. And the answer is yes. Under the hood, the callback queue is being used. Something is still being put on the callback. As I said, it is just syntactic sugar, which means it's just a cleaner way to write promises under the hood. Still, callbacks are a cleaner way to write callbacks. Under the hood, still callbacks are being written. If I write it here, a promise here, most probably you won't see it here. We can try it, but I'm sure, whoever is the developer of this hasn't taken that into account. Let's see. Const p equal to new promise function resolve, and then maybe set timeout resolve 1000, and then console.log. Hi there. Let's see what happens here. Set timeout reaches here. Oh yeah, that's what I was worried about. So set timeout reaches here. That is what you see. So yeah, I mean here to Kherchol, it's very clear what will happen. The promise never reaches the callback queue, but the set timeout does. I was thinking of finding a way in which we can show the promise reach here. But since we're just wrapping other function calls, you will just see those function calls here one by one. Let's see p dot then. I'm trying to see if yeah, you'll just see this. You'll just see set timeout reach here, and then get reached in the callback queue, which is why you will never see the promise here. But technically under the hood, so under the hood, even if set timeout was promisified, which it isn't, but if set timeout was promisified, returned your promise, and you did something like this, still what you would see go here would be like a set timeout callback thingy. So these are like very deep questions, which at the very high level do not matter at all when you're actually coding, but can pique curiosity, but even if you don't know the answers, it does not matter for the longest time. Why exactly are we using promises? Great question. So I'm going to write some code which is going to, be a little jarring, but bear with me for 5 seconds. As I said, callbacks have something called callback queue. Promises let you do two things that let you get rid of callback hell, not callback queue, which is number one, they let you do something called promise chaining. Number two, they let you use the async await syntax. This is a slightly cleaner way of writing this code. Harkirat, show me. Sure, I will show you. At the beginning, I said there are 3 key differences. If you understand these 3, you can say you understand everything. Look at these 3 things. I know the code is a little ugly. It's already like a screenshot, so it might be a little ugly, but you will find this at the end of 1.5. Callback syntax. Look at it. You call it and then function inside. Promise syntax, which is you call it and then you dot then. Look at the last one. Async await syntax. What do you do? You do const value equal to await function call. Isn't this beautiful? Compared to this and this, where where the value goes one level inside, you have an extra indentation here and here. Look at the third one. This is the async await syntax. If you're using promises, if this function returns a promise, you can actually use this syntax. Go to 1.5 covers this in much more detail. But this is 100% cleaner than this and this. That is why async await syntax, which can only be achieved if your function returns a promise, is why you use this. Also, you can do something called promise chaining, as I said, which means you can put a dot then inside, rather than doing what callback hell lets you do. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about what promise chaining is. The biggest reason you want to move to a promise is this syntax. You can use the async await syntax, which a lot of languages use. Rust has it. C++ I think also has it. And it's just a cleaner way to write asynchronous code, which is why promises were introduced. Is resolve reject there in the promise? Then why should we use catch in promises there? Great question. Great question. I don't know if I want to address it just yet, but if you don't add a dot catch, basically, just to answer your question, the await function will actually throw an error, so you can actually catch it in the try catch. But yes, if you have both a dot then and a dot catch, you don't need a try catch. Syntax is what don't people understand. That is the game, right? If you did not understand the for loop syntax, how is this working? Then you would have to just, struggle a bit to understand it. Similarly, that the same thing is true for promises. But the only thing I would say is just understand how you can. Oh, I see a lag. My testing. Okay. Just understand how you can call promisified functions. Ignore how you can, create promisified callback functions. Ignore that. Just understand how you can call them. If you understand whatever, a callback function dot then, and then you can, pass in a function. Or if you understand the other syntax that I talked about, await, async, main, and then inside you can do const value equal to await Think function A. If you understand how to call this A function that I'm just assuming exists, let's say it's a read file function or something like that, you should be fine. Don't worry too much about how you can create a promiseified function. That is the most difficult sort of syntax to understand. Calling it is where, if you understand that, you are fine for a lot of weeks to come. If we wrap nested set timeout inside a function, so that function stops the JavaScript thread execution now. No, sir. Fn comma duration, fn comma duration, function my own set timeout. Call my own set timeout with a function that does a console.log done, and duration is 1 second, and then put a console.log hello from outside. Even though I have written my own set timeout function and I call it and give it a callback, do you think this will get called first, or do you think thread will be stuck here? How will the control go? This function is defined, this function is called, control reaches here, control reaches here. This goes on to the whatever asynchronous, the web API section. And then your thread proceeds. If I copy this over, go to loop A. I mean, the best answer here would be paste code here and look at it. As you can see, it reached, happened too quickly. Let's do it for 10 seconds. Save and run. Set timeout reached here. My console.log still got called. My thread became idle. This will reach here, get pulled here. What if we want my task async function to be after some sync function between sync functions? Okay. I think someone is asking the same question again. Okay, bhaiya, how do I copy this? Good question. These are all good questions, curious questions. Don't trust me, won't matter in the long term, in the sense that you won't need any of this for the longest time. This will all be a black box. The only thing you would need is how to call a promiseified function. But let's get through all the doubts that you have. Great question you asked, sir. Beautiful question. You have an async function call, some sync task. Want my work in the async function to return, and then some other sync task. Who will write the code for this on Replit? Beautiful question and very simple answer. They want an async function call to happen and then want to run some synchronous task. Then want to wait for the asynchronous function and then want to run some synchronous task. We have already covered this a few times. I would urge everyone to write this on your machine, especially the people who understand this part. I'm going to write it myself. Function some sync task 1. Function some sync task 2. Set timeout is the function that sort of is the async function here. All right. First the async function runs, sir. Some sync task, let's call some sync task 1 here. Want my work which async returns. Okay, don't run any other code. Then some other sync task, run it here with all the data that you have. This returns you some data, use that data here, whatever. I want to run this task outside here. You cannot, unless you use the promise syntax and then, async await. You can do this as well, use this outside this curly braces. I'm assuming that is what you want to do eventually. But short answer to your question is this. Some sync task 1 will reside here, some sync task 2 will reside here, and it will have to be inside these braces is how it will, use the results from here and run this. Hopefully that is clear. Please tell me how you will promisify the callback of a 1 second timeout, then 2 second timeout, then 3 second timeout. The same function, promiseified timeout, duration. As I said, promiseified functions don't expect a callback. You can do const p equal to new promise function, resolve, set timeout, duration. This part I can totally get कि हरकीरत fast लिख दिया. I don't understand anything. You don't have to for the longest time. You will You don't have to create basically promisified functions on your own for the longest time. You just have to call them. So even if you don't understand this, it is fine. What you need to understand is how to call it. So ye lo ji. Dot then function log first is done. Now the question of the person was, Harkirat, how do I call one set promisified set timeout followed by another promisified set timeout? The answer would be this. Now comes a beautiful question that you should ask. Harkirat, callback hell is still there. You said there will be no callback hell. I still see callback hell, one indentation followed by another indentation. Great question, sir. Now I'm going to write something more that is going to overwhelm you, which is something called promise chaining, the thing that I was talking about, that gets rid of callback hell. You can do something like this basically. Here, don't understand it, don't have to. But this is how you can get rid of callback hell. This is one way. Promises let you get rid of callback hell by using promise chaining, which is what I've done. But don't worry about it. Even this is fine for now. Still callback hell is fine. The real reason you want to use promises is async await. I've covered this in much detail in 1.5 video. Go through it. If still an explanation is needed, we will do another doubt session where we cover it. But this is the bigger reason you want to use promises. This is the promise chaining. Good to know. Interview question. Don't use it in the real world. What does single threaded even mean? How JS is single threaded and Go is not? Can we not make JS multi-threaded? Great question, sir. Beautiful question. How is JavaScript single threaded, Golang is not? What does single threaded even mean? It means this function do something console.log either call do something few times. This is what means you mean by single thread. If JavaScript runs this code, it will reach here, then reach here, 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 here. Each other time will reach here. Copy this over, go to loop, paste it and run. There is a single call stack. Only one thing can get called in a single time. This is the reason why JavaScript is single threaded. Bigger question you asked was, why is Golang not single threaded? In Golang, you can do something called subroutines, which basically in Golang, if I call a function like this, or the syntax might be different, they go to a different small thread, which is called a subroutine. In Java, you can do something called multi-threads. In Rust, you can literally call thread.spawn and pass in a function inside. What these do is create another call stack where on a different thread they run. Does Node.js let you do that? No. There is no easy way for you to spawn another thread that can run some JavaScript code here. If you want to Google, there is something called the cluster module that lets you do something in which you can use all the cores of the machine. But simple multi-threading, what Java lets you do, what Golang lets you do, what Rust lets you do, this guy does not, unfortunately. JavaScript was meant to be a single-threaded language, and that is what it is. Promise is class or object. Promise is class, this thing. When I do let p equal to new promise and pass a function, p is an object. Similar to const d equal to new date. Date is a class. D is an object. How do you know, Harkirat? Let's log date and let's log d. Run it. What does it say? Function date and then this thing. Harkirat, it says function. Don't worry about it. Weird conundrum between how a function can be a class and class can be a function. But high level. And Harkirat, why is this a longer string? There are 1,000 reasons. Let's do this in fact. Now let's run it. Sorry. Promise and then p. Promise says a function, but it is a class. And promise, this is the actual object of the promise class. Is the resolve function inbuilt in JS? Great question. No. I can call this on done as well. The first argument, whenever the first argument gets called here inside the internal function of the promise, whoever has written p.then control reaches here. You can think of it, okay, bhai, the first argument, whenever it gets called, this gets called. And whenever I pass in here, either gets received as an argument here. Very similar to callback functions, right? If you call a callback function in a function, the function below gets called. Similarly, when you create a promise and call on done, whatever you want to call it, this is just the first, you can call it fn, you can call it first arg, you can call it resolve, you can call it anything. The point is the first argument, whenever that function gets called, is when control reaches the dot then on whoever did a p dot then. New promise again has resolve fun as arg lol. Promises are core part of JavaScript or just part of web APIs. JavaScript. They are JavaScript, ECMAScript. They are similar to, think of them as a global classes or a global variable like, where or const, or there's effectively a global class. More specifically, there's something like date, something that JavaScript provides you to easily write asynchronous code. They are not part of web APIs. They're part of the core JavaScript syntax. Does this mean that web APIs run on another core? So JavaScript needs two core, one for JSON, one for web APIs. JavaScript still runs on a single core. The task that has been offloaded does run on a different code, that is C++ code that is running. JavaScript is still single threaded. The task that has been offloaded is being done by someone else on a different thread, which is maintain a clock or read a file. But your JavaScript code, the part of delegating it to the other process, is still run on a simple JavaScript code, thread. Didn't get what resolve is. Yeah, that is the most difficult bit here, right? How do you define a promise? New promise ke andar bhi function ke andar bhi resolve. This is like a very weird syntax. Let's try to break it down a little bit. You can do const p equal to new promise, and then pass a function here fn, and then you can be function fn, which takes the resolve as a function, and then do whatever. Const a equal to 1 for I equal to 0, 1, I less than 100, I plus plus, a equal to a plus I. Return a. No, sorry, maybe resolve a. You can write this as well. This might be slightly cleaner. Rather than writing this whole function inside, I just separated it out as a separate function. But the high level idea is promise class expects a function as an argument, and the function that you're passing needs to have an argument upfront. You can actually try to create this on your own. You can actually create this, which will be like a beautiful assignment if someone does it. Right. And the first not five, you copy each other code. First, one person to do it will get a bounty. Try to create the promise class yourself. Forget that it exists. Call it, promise of my own. That, has the resolve, reject, whatever. So it's just a class that has been created, and it does expect a function as an input, and the function needs to have resolve. And this resolve, whenever it is called, whoever has done p dot then uses it. But again, don't worry about how to create it. That will just overwhelm. Worry about how to use it. If there is a function p, you can either do p dot then if it is promisified, or if it is not promisified, if it uses a callback, then you do this. Just understand how you can call it. Don't worry about creating it just yet. Even though if you can understand, that's great. Do promise also go to the callback queue? Yes, great question. Answered this a little bit a while ago. Put a promisified function here, you will see. Now, in our case, doesn't matter because, our promisified function has a set timeout, and the set timeout is what actually reaches here. And that's generally true. What promise doesn't exactly reach here, there is some call there. It under the hood still uses callback. So there is some, internal set timeout or fs.read file which will reach here. Why isn't the loop asynchronous? When print inside a set timeout printing something, let's see. Someone pasted this. I'm assuming this does something like this. And your question is for loop asynchronous in this case? The for loop is still synchronous. This sort of is asynchronous, like writing to std out requires again a system call to, put something on std out. This function, might be in the middle of executing and actually printing while your thread proceeds to the next for loop. But the for loop still is synchronous. It is putting a lot of things on the, so if I run this from here, you will see what happens. One thing got put here. Another thing got put here. Am I doing something wrong? Yeah. Another thing got put here. It'll just keep putting things here, which will keep getting put here. And eventually, when they do reach, control does reach here, it will log on the screen, which technically is a async function. I'm not sure if that was the exact question. So yeah, I'm going to proceed. If you still have doubt, post again. If we need output of an async function, another function input, how will we handle it? Great question. I've answered this a few times now, sir. Milap Dinesh Kumar Chaudhary. Great question, but I've answered this a few times. If you have an async function, function set timeout, that needs the value of another async function. The second async function will be inside the first async function. If this function needs some value from the first function, now set timeout doesn't return you anything, but you get the idea. A simple answer here would be this assignment. Which one? This one. File cleaner. Read a file, remove all the extra space, write back to the same file. When you remove all the extra space and write back, you first need to read the file. You first need the file to be read, do some manipulation on it, then write inside it. So the code would look something like this. Okay, you would first read, do a fs.read file, then get some contents data here, then do some manipulation with the data, and then do a fs.write file. So the second call will happen inside the first call. Is how one async function can use the contents of the other async function. Can I return an array of promises? You can do whatever you want. You can return an array of promises. How they get resolved is a whole different question. For this, I would urge you to go to this assignment. Good question. Go to hard and go to the second last one, promise all. If you have multiple promises in an array, there is a way to await on all of them. Again, we will get to it when we get to it. But yeah, you can return, you can do a let get promises, let P1 equal to new promise, P2 equal to new promise. Again, put the function here and everything, and then you can return an array of promises. You can do whatever you want. This function can return whatever you want. Question is, whoever gets it, they need to do something like this then. Either x of 0 dot then, and then, x of 1 dot then, or they can do the thing that I was talking about, which is promise dot all, which is, this assignment right here. So yeah. All right. Can we do this and it'll get the same result? Let's see. Yeah, you can probably do that. Copy. Can you do this? Promise dot resolve fn of x. You can do that if fn is a synchronous function. If fn is not a synchronous function, this will just go bonkers. Fn will return a promise, which is what will get resolved, which will have to, you would have, if fn is an async function that returns a promise, you will actually have to do, if it is something like this, you'll have to do x dot then followed by dot then, I think. So if fx is synchronous, then you are fine. For example, if, function fn return hello there, then this works. You can simply be like x dot then function value. Whoever is not getting this, don't worry about it. As I said many times, this is all you need to understand. Good to understand the rest of the things, but does not matter if you don't. So there you go. Hello there gets logged. What have I done here? I said immediately don't worry about this again. Like, how to create promises, don't worry about. How to call promises, worry about. Why are we using JS in? Why are we calling JS inbuilt functions like toLower, slice as the JS APIs? Oh, it's sort of an API of, okay. Question is Harkirat const name equal to Harkirat Singh. The name dot to lowercase. Why did I name the title of this video JS APIs? It just came to my mind, dude. Does it really matter if the name is wrong or right? वैसे तो you can see this is a JS API, right? It gives you this is a function that it provides you, so you call it an API, but like high level, that's the reason. If you think it's wrong, it might be wrong. Can we see it in debug mode in VS Code? The control flow, you can if you have it set it up locally. I don't, but if you have VS Code set, debugger setup, then yes, you can actually see the control go from places. Great way to actually understand how the code is going. Can we pass function inside resolve? You can. Why would you want to do it? I don't know. But const p equal to new promise. You can totally be like, okay, I'm going to resolve a function. But why would you do that? Usually, what does a asynchronous function do? You tell it read a file. It reads the file and returns you the content. It is supposed to return you a string or a number. It isn't really supposed to return you a function. So why would you do that is the question. You can do that. Okay. What if I want to return my own value from the problem-specified function? My own value, you can still do that, right? Function, my function, return new promise. Function, resolve, and resolve my own value. You can do this. The point really is, if you are not using any async function here, you are simply, returning this or doing for loops here, then why even create a promise? Then you can simply be like, my function, return my own value. The reason why you want to return a promise ever is either this or this, is when you have some asynchronous code here, so that someone else can do a dot then on it. If you don't have any asynchronous code here, if you want to return your own value, do a for loop, if you don't want to use fs.read file or set timeout, then why even create a function that returns a promise? Simply return the value, right? That's the high level. Where does the resolve function get defined? Beautiful question. Let me answer this. You answer this for me. Function see, sum of squares was our example, right? Square a, return a into a. Function sum of something, a comma b comma square or whatever, fn, const x equal to fn of a, b, might not have the best answer here. Let's call this on 1 comma 2 comma square. Not a good example. Not what I was hoping for. Okay. Question is, where is the resolve function defined? That is a good question, but it is not defined. It is passed in. You have to realize, okay, I can totally get why you're confused here. Question is, where is this defined, Harkirat? Where is this defined? I don't get it. What is a better way to explain it? Yeah, let's do this. Function, sum of squares gets a callback and then calls a comma callback and then calls callback with a into a. Okay, let's do this. And let's call sum of squares result and then console.log result. Forget this. Focus on this. I've created a function, sum of squares, that takes a number and a callback as an input and calls the callback function with a into a. Why? Just to explain this. I would never do this in the real world. In the real world, this would just return a into a. But just to show some examples, I call callback on a into a. Now I call it sum of squares 2 comma function. Where does result come from? It is what this guy passed to you, right? Similarly, when you're defining a new promise and have a function inside, resolve doesn't come from somewhere. It just, whoever will call function will call it with a resolve, and then you call that. And as I said, you can call it anything, but specifically to answer a question, which I'm answering it really bad here, function sum of squares, where does this result come from? Whoever calls it gives it here, right? Similarly, the function that you're passing in here, someone will call it and the person who calls it will send resolving here. How do I handle errors in promise-fied functions? So, yeah, long story short is promises let you do it. I don't want to introduce it just yet, but if you want the answer is this function my own promisified timeout return new promise. The first function actually accepts two arguments, not just resolve, it also accepts another argument called reject, or again, you can call it anything. You can call this on done and this on error. And then here you can be like, if there is ever an error here, you can call on error, and whoever is calling your function const p equal to this, they can do two things. They can do p dot then कि भैया whenever on done is called here, control reaches here, but they can also do dot catch कि भैया whenever on error is called here, then control reaches here. Kirat dot followed by another dot. How is that happening? That is just promise syntax. This also returns the promise, which is why you can do dot catch after this. But again, feel free to take it as a syntax. Okay, whenever you are calling fs.read file, you passed in two arguments other than the path a.txt and encoding. The callback had two arguments, error comma data. This is how a non-promisified function would signal an error. Similarly, this is how a promisified function signals an error. More specifically, when you're calling it, you do not just dot then, you also do dot catch. And then here is where the control will reach if there's an error. But again, don't just, if you understand this for now, we are sorted for the next class. Focus on that. Resolve is passed as an argument, but in the promise is used as a function inside set timeout. Resolve is a function. Yes, resolve is a function, but it is given to you by someone else. As I said, on done and on error. This you are passing this function as an argument. Someone else is going to call that function. Whenever that someone else calls this function that you're passing as an argument is when they will pass two arguments, which are functions themselves. Yes. I can totally get why it is tricky. Don't worry about it. This will get better as time goes by. But yeah, this is a tricky syntax, especially if you're worried about this part of how to create one. Could you please go over resolve method quickly? Sure. So as I said, when you create a new promise, this is a way to create a new promise. But the promise class, whoever is written it, says, "Ki bhaiya, give me a function as well, please. Whenever you're defining me, give me a function as well. And inside that function that you give me, I will give you two arguments. Whenever I call this function, I repeat, when you give to the promise class a function, the promise class at some point will call this function that you're passing in. That promise class will only give you these two functions that you are calling here. I repeat, very, very confusing. You give it a function. Time to share screen here. New promise function resolve. This is the promise class. Someone has created it. Class promise. It has a constructor, which if you don't understand what it is fine. But it is the place where control reaches for the first time. When you call new promise, you pass in a function here. And then this promise class has a bunch of methods. At some point, it calls this function that you passed in. So this function that you gave to the that you gave to the promise class, at some point it will call that function. So it will be like fn, and it will give you two functions that you then call here. I know, very, very difficult. Will take some marinating. I can totally get why would you not understand it. Function inside a function inside a function. Don't worry about it. Of course, practice and try to get it. And trust me, the only way you will get it is, eventually building an intuition for it, or, breaking it down into smaller functions like this. When I define a function, I'm going to, keep it inside function myfn and then, pass myfn here. But still, I can totally get why defining a promise seems jarring, as long as you understand how to call a promise, you will be fine for the few weeks. Eventually, you should understand this, how to define a promise. There you go. But in a few weeks is fine. Most confusing explanation. I do agree, sir. This is very confusing. This could just be on me as well. The explanation is really bad. I would urge you to go to this video 1.5 and see if that helps you a little bit. Here again, I've covered all of this in detail. What are promises? Why do you use them? But I can still totally get why it is confusing. Refunds are still open until tomorrow. If you still feel jarring or you don't like the learning pattern, ask for a refund and get out. This part is difficult and this is probably the best I can explain it. But if it still feels jarring or that you don't understand it, completely okay. Until tomorrow, ask for a refund. Don't even worry about it. No hard feelings. Can you elaborate on the dot then function? Sure. Okay. I have a function, let's call it my own timeout, that does a set timeout on a callback that you give it with 1000. Whenever I'm calling my own function, I pass in another function, right? Which is कि हाँ भाई control should reach here after 1 second has passed. This is me telling this function, or even if you don't have to worry about this, just focus on this. This callback function is me telling set timeout कि भाई please call this after 1 second. Similarly, if set timeout was a promisified function, I would do something like this. So what is the dot then? It is similar to you passing this callback. It is almost like a callback function कि हाँ, whenever this returns me a promise, that promise dot then do this. So at a high level, whatever you were expecting to do in this callback, you would expect to do in this dot then. Cool. What is the purpose of resolve? What purpose does resolve serve? Again, this is the part of defining the promise. Function my own set timeout. Let me take a pause. From the people who are left, which is half of the people who did not understand promises and half of the people I can see who did understand promises are left. How are we doing? Is it getting clear or is it still pretty bad? Okay. So great. 30% of the people who are left are still confused. So would again urge you 70% to, if you understand everything, no point waiting here and waiting for me to answer questions. Try to solve these assignments. Specifically, the good ones here are, let's see. These two are very good. Will teach you something new. This you have done. This is also very good. So 2, 3, 4 in hard are really good. Would harden a few concepts. Go there. Medium, this one's easy, but good. This one's also easy, but good. Everything else is pretty easy. If you really understand everything, try to solve these problems. Are good problems to solve. And as I said, the bounty is create promise on your own, a promise class on your own that does similar things that the inbuilt promise class does. All right. Can't we create async await functions? Now you can. I'm trying to avoid that until we understand the simple promise syntax, but you can. As I said, there are 3 parts here. 3 things that do the exact same thing. Mentioned very well in 1.5. You can go to it and understand the explanation better. But these 3 things, as you can see, the last one uses the async await syntax. I have covered this in 1.5. Have covered this in one more detail, 2 in a calm fashion. 3, you can go to it after 5 hours, after a brain has, taken some break. So would urge you to go through this. If you don't understand async await after that as well, we'll take a doubt session for the people who don't. What are some scenarios where you would prefer synchronous code versus asynchronous code? Vice versa. This isn't really a choice. If you have to do a network call, if you have to do a database call, if you have to read something from the file system, you have to use asynchronous functions. Now you can read the file synchronously as well, believe it or not. Fs equal to require fs dot read file sync, as the name suggests, lets you read a specific file synchronously. Should you do it? Probably not. Why? Because your thread will be stuck here until the file is read. So let's see this function. So you can read the file synchronously. What is the problem? If the file read takes if the file read takes 20 seconds, your thread is stuck here for 20 seconds. When you know, okay, bhaiya, one function is one very expensive, two can be delegated to someone else. Why not delegate it to someone else asynchronously while you do other things? So let's run this code. Huh. Oh, data is empty. No. The argument's different. Yeah. Path options. Oh, returns a buffer. Makes sense. Since this is an asynchronous function, you can just call it like this. There is no real callback. Now, if I run this, you will see first data gets logged in this. But was it good for you to run this synchronously and call read file sync when you know you can actually call read file, which reads the file asynchronously? And while it is reading the file asynchronously, you can do other tasks. Is it really good for you to, stop the thread here while the file is being read? The answer is no, because this can take 1 second, this can take 10 seconds. You don't want the rest of your program to suffer. Delegate this task, run the rest of your program. Eventually, when this is done, your callback will be called. Where is reject in parameter? So here we first understand resolve. Reject is the second argument, which you can and cannot give. Most of the times, we would assume our program will just work fine. So for now, don't worry about reject. Just understand resolve and you're fine. If you want to learn reject, if you understand resolve, you should Google reject, and it's very simple to understand. Delegation of task context switching done on different threads. I answered that. Okay. First time I was able to go through everything, I think. It's completely boggled. I totally agree. As long as you can understand how to call a promisified function, you should be fine. If you don't understand this as well, it is a problem. Then Google a little, try a little on your own. Forget that classes exist. At least try this class where I've covered this slightly more detail. But that does not happen. Ask for a refund. Totally fine. Could be early for you, could be a bad teacher, whatever the reason. Aram se chill and ask for a refund. If this you don't understand, life will be a little hard. Okay, I think. Okay, G. Opening chat one more time. Let me put this thing here. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Less people now, so you can ask more questions. Let it flow, let it flow. All right. Is resolve like kind of like a return function? What returns arguments? So resolve is like a return function for us, any asynchronous function. Yes, but it doesn't return arguments. It returns the response only. If I tell you write a function sum that sums two things, a plus b, and I say write a promisified function that returns the sum, even though you don't really need promises here. This is a synchronous function, does not do a file system read, does not do a set timeout. But let's say I say create a promisified function that returns a promise. Then you would still do resolve of a plus b. So it still returns the response only, does not return the argument. It might feel a little confusing, but if I ever have to call this promisified sum function, I would call it like this: sum dot then answer uh, So this answer is still the sum of what this function is. The answer, there is still the response what this function is supposed to return you, not any arguments. What's the point of an async function when await is used? It is just a syntactical limitation. Okay, if you ever want to use function, my good fn, if you ever want to use the await syntax, so let response equal to await another function, it will complain. It says await expressions are only allowed inside an async function, so you have to put async here. It is just a restriction on JavaScript side. Okay, if you're ever using this third type of syntax, as I said, there are three ways you can call an asynchronous function: callbacks, promise ka then syntax, or this third one. If you are using this third one, which I am here, this await call needs to be inside an async function. All right. When we run this code on loop, why does the second for loop execute before the set time? Okay, let's see. Let's see if there's something fishy in your code, sir. Console.log hi, then a set timeout, then console.log welcome to loop, then a set timeout, then a bunch of expensive operations. The question by Naman is, when we run this code on loop, why does the second for loop execute before the set timeout function, as the set timeout reaches callback queue before? Wohi to yaar. Doesn't matter if the set timeout reaches here first. If there is any synchronous code, it will be what will be prioritized by the thread. The thread will be like, I'm running this, set timeout, go outside. I am running this, set timeout, go outside. I am running this, I am running this. Does not matter if something has reached the callback queue. I will keep doing my thing. It is like, so I'm going to take the Maggie example here from this 1.5 class. If I have a friend and I tell them, bro, go get some ketchup while I make Maggie, and I'm chopping vegetables, and they come to me and say, bro, here is your ketchup. I will still continue chopping my vegetables. I will not stop my task, be like, acha, do, give me the ketchup, keep it here, and then start again. If I'm chopping vegetables, I will keep chopping vegetables. They can come and stay in the callback queue, or like wait for a few more seconds until I finish. Only when I become idle is when I'm going to tend to my friend. Similarly, only when the thread becomes idle, which is on this line, is when it will start picking up things from the callback queue. Week 1 assignments question mark. I'm assuming your question is, where is the solution for them? I was supposed to do it today, but most probably going to come as an offline video. Yeah. I want to quickly learn Next.js. Please give me some references. Let me post the Next.js basic video from last cohort in the ad hoc section. You can just go through it. References, I'm sure there are a bunch of good videos, but in this ad hoc classes, I'll add another class, which is a Next.js class on the last cohort. Is Alchemy University good for running Web3? Probably, but let's stick to the questions for now, and then we can do it. We can answer these questions. Defining a promise is not dot then function. Defining a promise is not used much, right? I think so. What you're asking is, we don't use dot then much, right? Yeah, we don't. We usually use async await. But we can, for the next few weeks, get by with the dot then syntax. Eventually, we will reach the dot await syntax, like await is async await syntax. But for now, if you understand dot then, at least you can call promisified functions. That is the first thing we need to do. Resolve is simple things, like just like resolve is a simple thing. Someone is, I think, trying to explain this better than me. Okay, let's see. Resolve is a simple thing, just like a callback function when done with it. Okay, let me just paste this. Oh, okay, it's a question. Someone asked this. Let me actually just paste it. It's a long question, so let me just put it in the slides here. Resolve is a simple things, just like callback function. When you're done with the things, you call your callback function. Similarly, when promise, it has to be resolved. It will resolve the resolve function, which is then then's function. Okay, like you resolve promise and pass the data, so that the resolve function is the function which is decided dot then. Okay, yeah, I think you understand it, sir. Yes, basically yes. I can understand what you're trying to say, which is just like sum of squares had a third function, and then you would do the function call with whatever a into b or whatever you do. Let me just do it. Let value 1 equal to a into a, let value 2 equal to b into b, and then function should resolve value 1 plus value 2. Yes. Just like you call function here, that the person who is calling passes to you, and then you get the value here. Exactly like this. If this was promisified, you would do sum of squares 1 or 2 dot then, and then have this function here. Yes. This is how you call a non-promisified async function. This is how you call a promisified async function. The difficult bit is how do you write a promisified async function, which, as I said, we will get to when we get to. When do you use pass like calling function suppose work done? Pass like, oh, great question. When do you do this, Harkirat? And when do you do this, Harkirat? Whenever you have called something, you can replace this thing with the contents of the function call. So if there is a function called I do something which returns 1, let's say. If I pass I do something called over here, I am effectively passing 1 over here. What is this expecting? Is it expecting a number? No, it is expecting a function, which is why you don't call it when you're sending it. Simply pass the function. Harkirat, what if this has arguments? Then also I only call the function. Yes. If this does have arguments, whenever sum of square calls it, it will pass those arguments here. So it's this guy's responsibility to pass those arguments. You don't have to pass those arguments here. A very common use case where people did this was set timeout. Okay? They were doing set timeout of sum of 1, 2, 2000, where sum is this function or whatever, console.log a plus b. This is wrong because this is similar to you doing this. You don't want to do this. What if you want to do this? You will actually do something like this. You will define a function here which calls sum of 1, 2. Cool. This is the right way of doing it. This is the wrong way of doing it. This is the same as doing this, which this guy doesn't know what to do with 3. Or set timer doesn't know what to do with 3. It'll be like, it'll panic basically. All right. Do we have to write our tasks in the function particularly to call in dot then? What is the goal of dot then? Okay, bhaiya, it is the same as a callback function, right? If you call something specifically, like say set timeout, and you say, the first function needs to, I did something after 1 second. Similarly, the same thing you would do if set timeout was promisified. You would be like set timeout 1000 dot then, as the name suggests. Once this is done, do this. Alrighty. Do a dry run. Sure, let's do it. Let's create a promisified function. Function promisified timeout. Return new promise. Function resolve set timeout. Function call resolve after, let's do 5 seconds. All right. And let me call promisified timeout dot then, and let's resolve with some data here. Done, baby. I am burnt out. And then let's get the value here, and then let's do a console.log value. All right. Let's put a few logs to see how is control going everywhere here. Let's put a log at the top. At the top 1, let's put a log here. In the middle 2, let's put a log here. Function called 3. Let's put a call here. Inside promise callback 4. Let's put a log here. Set timeout called 5. Let's put a call here, promisified, then 6. I basically tried to rename it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just how I think it should be run. Let's run this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then done, baby, I am burnt out, got printed. So okay, control is going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like that. Let's see. 1, control will reach here. Function will get defined, but nothing would log. Function is just getting defined here. 2 runs, which means control reaches here. And then I say promisified timeout. I call it. So control reaches here. Console.log, function called 3 gets called. It returns new promise. I also say whatever gets returned on it, I say dot, then this thing should get called. It hasn't been called, which is why this does not get logged. Then control reaches to 4. Then set timeout happens. Then we saw the 4th log, and then we saw a gap of 5 seconds because set timeout was waiting to be called. Then this gets called. Then resolve happens. So the control reaches here. Then this gets called, and then the value is printed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me justify this so you can see it after the class. Chat. Oh, sorry, pasted it in the chat. Alrighty. Oh, I see a few more questions rolling. Seems like they're coming eventually. Okay. Is resolve kind of like return statement, but returns arguments? I think I answered that. Someone created a promise class, which totally looks wrong to me, sir. Mohammed, I think this is not going to do what you think it is, but either way, yeah, this might not do what you think it is. Right. What's the point of async function when await is used? Yeah, I think answer that. Okay, let's go. Done this. More bounty, sure, some while. Do we have to write our task functions particularly to call dot then? Do we have to write a task in a function particularly to call in dot then? Okay, I think I answered that, right? In dot then you call whatever you would put in the callback if the function wasn't promisified. You put in dot then. Dry run we have done. Okay, from here. What's the point of async function? Okay, I answered that. Downloading a file from the browser and do some other task on the website while you're downloading is process is happening in some web API container. Is a real world example of async. Great, sir. If I'm on this file and I click on some download button here, that download is coming from some server in US, UK. While that download is coming back, my JavaScript thread should do other things. So that is also a great sort of example of what should be an async call. Promise very hard, I agree. Promise is very hard. So all the web API call in the run other thread on the main thread. So can you explain the thread of JS? How many threads is Chrome that is doing that? You are talking again about the main thread. Then what is the other thread? Do JavaScript also go to other thread? Means there is a lot of thread in the browser and you're calling the main thread on the JavaScript run? Great question. Yeah, the browser can invoke multiple threads on your machine. If I have Chrome running right now, it does 1,000 things that are outside the main JavaScript thread. What is the main JavaScript thread, Harkirat? The main JavaScript thread is the thing that is running the code that you wrote. The developer wrote this code. There are 1,000 other things that the browser does. The browser is painting things here on your canvas. I am almost 100%, not 100%, very certain that this painting is happening on a different thread. I could totally be wrong because that isn't handled by the JavaScript thread. I could be wrong, but most probably this painting colors here is done on a different thread. What are called I/O calls, which is input-output calls. Not set timeout isn't a good example. Network calls is the best example. Okay. If I go to ChatGPT and I write something here, hi, my name is Harkirat, and I click on send, I don't get the response back immediately. It takes 5 seconds. Do you think that the JavaScript thread that, if I write something here, the JavaScript is kicking into, put it here, or I don't know, if there was a color that was changing here, JavaScript is doing that. If I type something here, click enter, and the ChatGPT model takes 20 seconds to respond back, Should my thread be stuck over here? If I try to write something else, should it stop? No, right? So for that reason, it won't stop, but like generally you get the high level idea. If I'm making a network call, what is a network call? Me clicking send here, this input reaching ChatGPT's US server, it running there a machine learning model, it then returning me back the response after 20 seconds. During those 20 seconds, I want my website to be alive. That is a good example of a function call that should be delegated, a function call that should not run on the main thread. The thing that is waiting for the response from ChatGPT server should not run on the main thread. Good question. I can totally get why the main thread it could get confusing. Very technical-ish question. I'm trying to get what the best answer here, but at a high level, the best answer is the code that you write here, the code that the developer has written, which as we go to React is going to be more complex code, but like let's say simple code that you've written, running on the JavaScript thread, anything that you've delegated to this web API section, running on a different thread. Chrome can run multiple threads. If you're running Google Chrome, there is a good chance it is using 5 of your cores of your machine. How to do promise chaining? Let's get to it eventually. But high level, if you really want to know, as I said, you can do something like p.then return new function call dot then return other fn dot then, so on and so forth. This is called promise chaining. Don't worry about it. I've seen someone creating threads in Node.js. There is a good chance you can definitely spawn processes in Node.js, which will create another thing. You can probably spawn a JavaScript process in Node.js, which basically means you're sort of creating a new thread. There might be a library that lets you do a thread.spawn, and you can put a function inside. Totally possible. I haven't used it ever. It is not very common if it is true, but there is a very good possibility that someone has created a library that lets you do something like this in JavaScript. Okay. Let's see. Do we have to give promise class to the function as the original? Do we have to give the promise class all the functions as the original one has? Anshuman, could you repeat the question? I will open chat again. Someone created another promise class. Harsh Gaur. Let's see. This one looks slightly better. Oh, it's not the complete thing, but let me take a screenshot. If it is right, then we'll give you the bounty. Assuming it's not ChatGPT, which it totally could. Resolve is a simple thing. Just like, okay, answer that. Suppose there are 2 file read requests. The first one reads from a large file, second one from the small file. Do 2 threads get created? Probably yes. If there are, I don't have, maybe not. Most probably, if I had to guess, yes, 2 different threads will get spawned, or 2 different threads can handle. First can handle the large file, second can handle the small file. Could totally be wrong. 99% this is true. If we pass an API overcall, how C++ knows JavaScript code? If we pass, good question. So C++ doesn't really know JavaScript code. C++ has been spawned to do something. C++ has been told, okay, do something, and whenever you're done, let him put something in the callback queue. C++ doesn't really know JavaScript code. Good question. Not needed for general full stack things, or generally. Deep question. Don't have a good answer. I want to return value after performing an async call, but it returns undefined. Let's see. Copy. You want to return the resolved value. What you're saying is, if you want to return the resolved value, it means you want to not use a promise. You actually want to, basically return 10 here after 1 second. You're basically trying to make this a synchronous function. You want to return something to be a synchronous function. You want to return the final value here that you are going to get after an expensive operation, which you've sort of simulated here, which is a set timeout. What you're trying to do, you can do by doing something like this. Return 10. You can busy wait for a long time or for 1 second, have a very long loop that runs for 1 second and then return 10. What you're trying to do here is you're creating a promise. You want it to resolve right here only and then return the final value. A function can either be asynchronous or synchronous. It cannot be both. You are saying, I want this part to be asynchronous, but it to return the synchronous thing. I hope that if you're creating a promise, you return a promise, and whoever is using it needs to call a dot then. If you want to do an expensive operation and the value to be returned as such to the user, even though you know there is an expensive operation here, it is similar to you doing file fs.read file sync. So you're effectively, you'll have to busy wait over here, or basically you have to busy wait, which is what read file sync also does. Okay, bhaiya, even though read file takes a lot of time, you want to do it synchronously. Similarly, even though your function takes 10 seconds, you still want to return the value synchronously. Then you will have to create something like this, which, as I showed, the way to do that might be to busy wait inside your function right here and then return 10, so that after 1 second does 10 get returned. Assignments there is a function that sort of there's a thing that sort of teaches busy waiting, which also sort of might do what you want to do. Let's see where that is though. Counter, read from file, write to file, counter. No, this isn't it. Sleep completely, this one. Write a function that halts the JavaScript thread, makes it busy wait for a given number of milliseconds. During this time, the thread should not be able to do anything else. You sort of want that, right? You are saying, okay, return the right value, but the value cannot be achieved before a second. So you will have to busy wait here. Cool. Why do we use the arrow function? What difference does it create? It creates a very simple difference that this variable binding changes. Don't even worry about it at this moment. But you can write functions two-way. Function sum AB return A plus B, or you can be like const sum equal to an arrow function, which does something like this. Is there a difference? Yes. Does it matter right now? Not at all. Okay, I answered Next.js. All right. Last set of questions, guys. Let me create a... TAs are always there to help you out after this. I'm assuming the thing that you're still stuck on is promises, which will come via practice. But if you need more videos, let me know. Chat is open. All right. As long as there's reference in the call stack, callback queue references will not be picked up. As long as there are references in the call stack, yes. As long as there are things in the call stack, callback queue will not be cleared. That is correct. What if I want the response of an async function to be available later, sometime in the code wherever I want, rather than the operation being completed and the data is available? Do promises serve this purpose only? What if I want the response of an asynchronous function to be available later, sometime in the code, whenever I want, rather than the operation being completely data available? So don't understand your question very well, Edna, Venkata. Yeah, I will open chat again for you, but I don't understand. Can you frame the question a little bit better? Maybe write some code or ask TAs as well, if in case I miss your questions after this. I have used async and await in a project in order to fetch functions via another waits for another function, which is refreshes access data token. Okay. Do you have a question though, or did you just want to tell that? Which is great. Yeah, you use async await when you're doing fetch calls. Dot then versus async await. Whatever that is done with dot then can also be done with async await. Yes. Promise copy someone created, which also looks wrong to me. Call back. Ishant, I think it looks wrong. See, you promise callback. Oh, that looks right. Ishant, that looks right. Simple, straightforward, and sweet. That looks right to me. Let's see. Let's actually see it. Promise copy. For the people who want to see the code, it is this const p equal to new promise copy. Let's see. That mostly, okay. This is where you will see the difference between an arrow function and a normal function, I feel. Let's see. Nope. This dot pass equal to pass has an error. Why does, oh, this is very close what you've done. There is resolve, call back of this. There is one small bug here, but mostly is right. So if you want to read encryption key stored in a file which needs to hit an API, should it call asynchronously? Everything else, that is correct. Even if everything else depends on the code, yes, you will first call it asynchronously. You will get back the response, and in the dot, then you will write your actual logic, or in the callback, you will actually write your actual logic. You will have to wait until you get back the response asynchronously. What if there are two await set timeouts, first for 10 seconds, other for 5 seconds? How much time will both take to execute? So at high level, they will take close to 5 seconds and 10 seconds, but there will be, some extra 5.0001 seconds and then 10.0002 seconds it will take to run. But yeah, maybe I don't understand your question well, but if there are two set timeouts, one for 5 seconds, one for 10 seconds, both will run after 5 and 10 seconds. What other, okay, answer that. Please try to be clear out all concepts in live class instead of offline videos. If possible, provide offline videos just for revision. And I think I'm going to do it the other way around. Okay, first provide the offline videos of what's coming, and then live may you go all in versus the other way around. But still, yes, trying my best here. So basically, resolve is just the callback function that has to be done after the async task. Yeah, you can say that. It is almost like calling the callback function. Rather than calling the callback function, you call resolve, and rather than getting it as an argument, you get it in the dot then. But yes. Oh, Akash did the bounty. Seems like before the other person. So let's look at that as well. Very, very long. But it looks right. Akash, most probably. I will test it, but seems like this might be it. Beginners don't even worry about it. It's totally fine. Ignore it. Focus on just using promises. Can we return value instead of resolve something? They're both the same. Not exactly. If there is an asynchronous function, it can't really return a value because it immediately does not know any value. If I go here and call set timeout, or more specifically, let's say fs.read file, I cannot do fs.read file a.txt let x equal to this, unless I have, of course, called read file sync, as I said. But let's say you cannot. Let's say this is an asynchronous function. The value, you don't even know at this point what the value is, right? Your thread doesn't immediately get it. So whatever x you have here has no wajud. You will have to give a callback where the final value will come, because you don't immediately get it. And the callback is what the OS will call when it actually has the value. So no, if it's an asynchronous function, you can't do anything much with this value. It can return you some things, some extra metadata information, but can't return you the actual content. How a promise knows to execute? When only then function when promise is resolved and catch will reject the state is achieved. How a promise knows? Neeraj Dio Chake. How does promise know to execute only then function when promise is resolved and catch when reject state is achieved? Very confused with the question, sir. Could you elaborate a little bit more, or ask TAs after the class, because this might be the last time I open chat. The promise taken function as argument, the function taken resolve as argument, resolves takes something as an argument, the dot then takes function as an argument, the function takes something as an argument, and whatever was passed resolve is passed to the value. I don't know if you're joking here, Gokul, or if this is an explanation, but if it is an explanation, great explanation. I did not understand it, went like this, but if someone else does understand it, this is an explanation that Gokul gave. Could totally be a joke as well, the way, based on the way it is written. The async function is goes to the web API stack and runs side by side with synchronous functions. So how is it single threaded? Because exactly, you delegated the task. If I as a human being is single threaded, I can only chop vegetables at a time or boil something or do one thing at a time. But I can ask a friend to do it, right? My brain is still working on one thing. And for a 1 second, my brain just told my friend, go get ketchup. And then my brain is back to doing this other thing. My friend can do other things. JavaScript is sort of I mean, I can totally get, you can say that JavaScript is not single threaded by. It is able to spawn other processes. Yes, it is. It is able to spawn other threads to do other tasks, things like, read file and other things. Technically, JavaScript is still single threaded. It is doing its work. For a second, it said, bro, do this thing. Then it went back to doing its work. When that was done, it didn't immediately get the response and started doing two things parallelly. It said, wait in the callback queue. It's still doing its own thing. When it's free is when it picks something from the callback queue. But yes, you are right, sir. You don't get into the technicalities of it, or you can. JavaScript is double threaded. It is able to delegate tasks. Yes, it is. But like the logic specifically is still single threaded. It can delegate tasks which can run on another thread, but the value, after it gets the value, it can still do things with it only on the single thread. Okay. All right. So basically, resolve is just the okay answer that. Please explain JS execution context memory management with Flow Sketch. Please explain JS execution context and memory management with Flow Sketch. Sure, at some point, definitely not in the near future. We don't have to go that low level for a long time. Seems like an extra class to do at some point, but not right now. Nested promise is equal to promise chaining. You could say that sort of slightly different though. Please try to clear out all. Okay, answer that. Someone asked some question that I don't understand, but let's see. This is the question. Let me copy it. Let me see. We can't shift the class timing, unfortunately, because it's what's been committed and you can't really change that mid of the course. Whoever bought the course with the timing has bought the course with the timing. It's unfair to them to change the class timing as much as I want to. I couldn't. I mean, I also want it to be later. It can't happen at 6. It could have happened at 8, but again, we can't do that for whatever is committed. We have to follow that, unfortunately. As the async function goes into the web API stack, runs. Okay, I answered that. Okay. Cool. One last thing that someone posted. Let me see. What runs under the hood here? Is set timeout a promise? What if we want to pass a promise-ified function inside resolved? Is it the same as promise chaining? Okay, let's answer the first question. What happens here? Resolve set timeout something. This will resolve whatever set timeout returns you. Set timeout returns you nothing. If I do a let x equal to set timeout and do a console.log x, put an empty function here. What is x? No. X is just undefined. So if you do a resolve of set timeout, it's similar as doing resolve khali or resolve undefined, which is basically nothing. Second question is, what if we pass a promisified function inside resolve? Promisified function inside resolve. Function that returns a promise. That, let's say, immediately resolves. If you do this first function, that is sort of like promise chaining. You are right. That is sort of like promise chaining. So if you don't understand this part, you don't even worry about it. But yeah, this is promise chaining because now I can do something like first function dot then result dot then something. So this is not exactly like promise chaining. You can probably do something like this because this itself is a function. You actually have to call it. Yes, this is not exactly promise chaining. Very close, but not exactly this. I think this is how your code, whatever you asked, would work, where you'll get the response, which itself is a function which you will call, and then you just don't even worry about this. It's too confusing. Doesn't have to be. When we introduce Node.js and HTTP, things will be much easier, much lighter. You will just use a bunch of these promiseified functions and call things. Good to know all of these things. Not great to get too into the depths of it. It is good generally. I can tell you, I have never in the longest time, worried about, oh, are there two threads, one thread? I understand at a high level, this function call delegates it to another thread. This is what async function. This is what callbacks are. This is how promises make it better. High level, I would urge you to focus there. If you want to go into the internals, you can. I can tell you a lot of TAs might not be able to answer the questions if you're going into the depths of how, a delegate function is getting run on a C++ call, and does it make it multi-threaded? Because there's no good answer there. That's a high level. What I would, how I would urge you to target things from here. Last one poll before we call it. How was the class? We'll have to end it here, but again, happy to take doubts later on as well. Cool. Great. Thank you for joining. Can totally get it was an overwhelming class. Ask TAs, solve assignments, spend a lot of time coding, and even if you don't understand how to create a promise, it is fine. Make sure you understand how to call a promisified function. Cool. With that, I'll have to end it. A little long class. I think if we extend after this, neither will my brain work, not yours. But hopefully, slightly things are clear, and rest will eventually be clear. All right. Promise someone has already won, I think. So yeah, we'll have to call it here. Thank you everyone for joining. I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.